Chapter 487. Boom Boom Boom. When Lin Muyu, Tang Xiaoxi, and Bai Yin rushed out of the tomb, a series of explosions came from below. The purple snowflower totem outside the tomb was already trembling, and it was only a matter of time before the inside of the mountain collapsed. The three of them quickly rushed into the lake and swam away from this realm that was about to say goodbye to the world. Lin Muyu's clothes were soaked by the cold lake water, and she couldn't summon too many monarch battle flames for her battle armor. Fortunately, Tang Xiaoxi was there to take care of her, so she was fine. When the three of them emerged from the pool in the canyon, it was already dawn of the next day. Time seemed to pass much faster in King Huai's tomb compared to the outside world. It was very mysterious. Not far from the shore, the patients with stone necrosis who were in a petrified state let out low wails. They stared at Lin Muyu, Tang Xiaoxi, and Bai Yin with eyes full of hatred. Go in the opposite direction and avoid them, Lin Muyu said. Okay. Tang Xiaoxi grabbed his arm and swam with him, and Bai Yin swam clumsily with them. It seemed that after this time, Bai Yin would be able to grasp the basic skills of swimming. After reaching the shore, Bai Yin immediately cupped his fists and said, "Commander, we can't stay here for long. Since we've found what we want, let's hurry back to Lanyan City." No hurry. Lin Muyu waved her hand. Let's look around and see if there are any 7-star flowers. 7-star flowers? Bai Yin was stunned. Lin Muyu said, soul flowers and 7-star flowers can be mixed together and boiled to form a medicine that will disperse with the wind. Hopefully, it will be able to cure these stone necrosis patients. Bai Yin narrowed his eyes and said, Commander, please don't blame Bai Yin for speaking out of turn. These stone flukers even tried to harm us before, so why should we waste such a good herb like the soul flower to save them? Lin Muyu smiled. That's just their subconscious behavior. Furthermore, they didn't really hurt us. Bai Yin, don't blame me for talking too much. There are thousands of cultivators in the Shattered Cauldron realm, but why are there so few who can step into the sanctuary or even the godly state? To put it bluntly, it's because everyone only cultivates martial arts and not martial ethics. One's state of mind determines one's cultivation. If everyone could think of the common people, I'm afraid there would be more than 100 sanctuary experts in the Shattered Cauldron realm. Bai Yin was startled, but he respectfully said, This subordinate admires you. Not long after, Tang Xiaoxi found a patch of 7-star flowers in a valley, which made Lin Muyu extremely happy. She offered up her cooking pot, scooped up a pot of water, and started a fire to boil it. Those stone necrosis patients could only whimper on the other side of the lake. Their eyesight seemed to be very poor, and they couldn't see the specific location of Lin Muyu and the others at all. Taking out stalks of soul flowers from her cosmos sack and arranging them together, Lin Muyu took a deep breath and lightly opened her palm, activating the king's battle flame to activate the condensing hand. Immediately, the soul flowers trembled, and not long after, milky white medicinal essence left the petals and lingered in Lin Muyu's palm. At the same time, Lin Muyu was multitasking, and her other hand was refining the 7-star flower's medicinal essence. The two kinds of medicinal essence were mixed together, and when the water in the pot boiled, they were thrown in together. Immediately, a faint fragrance wafted in the wind. This place was upwind, and the medicinal essence floated past, quickly sweeping through the entire valley. More than 2 hours later, Bai Yin squinted his eyes at the stone necrosis patients in the distance and said, It seems like there's no effect. Commander, why don't we give up? No. Lin Muyu's clear eyes were filled with determination and said, Bai Yin, look at the young stone necrosis patient closest to us. The stone skin on her arm is slowly falling off, and she's bleeding. It's true. Bai Yin was dumbfounded. That's right, the divine detoxification water was known as the world's #1 antidote, and its effects were extraordinary fast. The stone scales of the stone necrosis patients in the distance had already begun to fall off, and after fresh blood flowed out, the skin would begin to regenerate, and at the same time, their lives would be reborn. Just like that, Bai Yin went to gather firewood, and Tang Xiaoxi brewed the medicine. The three of them stayed here, and for 3 consecutive days, they helped treat the people in the valley. Although it seemed like a waste of 3 days, Lin Muyu firmly believed that these 3 days were not wasted. First, they could save at least 1,000 stone patients in the valley, and second, they could cultivate their mental states and cultivate their hearts. But for those who had truly achieved outstanding achievements in cultivation, which one of them wasn't a compassionate person? God Emperor Fuxi, God Emperor Nua, these ancient gods were all compassionate existences. Take the 7 luminaries Demon Emperor, for example. Although he was a demon, he wasn't completely evil. In front of Lin Muyu, he acted like a big brother. As for Qin Yi, the only person in the Qin clan who had cultivated to become a god emperor, his ultimate goal in hunting down the 7 luminaries Demon Emperor was probably to bring peace to the 3 realms. As for Luo Lan, this first-stage god realm expert had not made any breakthroughs after so many years. It must have something to do with her mental state. If Luo Lan had really cultivated her mental state, she would have long cultivated to become a god king and roamed the heaven realm. Another 2 days passed, and after a total of 5 days, the stone patients who had been wandering aimlessly in the valley had all gathered together. Many of them let out cries of pain. Just before the sun set, a group of mostly recovered stone patients supported each other as they walked around the lake. What are they trying to do? Bai Yin's palm pressed on the hilt of his sword. Don't be nervous. Lin Muyu reached out and pressed on the sheath of his sword. The stone in these people has been cured. They are no longer a threat to us. Don't hurt them. Yes, Commander. At this moment, a group of patients who had just recovered from stonefall disease were less than 10 meters away from each other. An old man who looked to be in his 60s walked over shakily with the help of a young girl in plain clothes. His murky eyes were filled with gratitude as he said, "Everyone, young swordsman, may I ask if it was you who cured us with the smell of the medicinal soup?" Lin Muyu walked forward and cupped her fists respectfully. "Yes, old man. How long has the stone necrosis been going on here?" About 300 years. The old man instantly burst into tears. "Our fathers and grandfathers all died in the hands of the stone necrosis. There are few people in the village who can live past 50 years old. Young hero, it was you who changed the fate of our village. Please accept this old man's salute." "Old man, you're welcome." Lin Muyu directly supported him with her hand. "We're just helping out when we see injustice, hee." The old man was stunned. There was no such thing as helping out when we see injustice in the Shattered Cauldron realm. This was also one of the reasons why the people of the Shattered Cauldron realm did not practice martial arts. There was no one who would do justice and help the masses. Even the House of Chivalry was just a name. Real rangers were no different from mercenaries. They were all people who chased after fame and fortune. "Young hero, we don't have anything good to give you, but we must repay you for saving our lives. So, we can only give you some treasures that our ancestors have kept for many years. Little Yen, little Qin, bring it over." The old man ordered. Immediately, 2 young girls walked forward. They had just recovered, but each held a golden stone in their hands. Lin Muyu couldn't help but be stunned. "Old man, is this a gold mine?" "Aha, I think you've misunderstood. We didn't boil the medicine to cure your poison for you to repay us. There's no need for a gold mine." The old man shook his head and said with a smile, "Young hero, you've misunderstood. This is not a gold mine. This is a mysterious gold stone. After grinding it into powder, it can be used as a consumable material for writing heavenly books. These 2 mysterious gold stones contain a very rich spiritual power and can be called mysterious gold stones of the highest grade. This is a treasure that has been passed down by our ancestors for hundreds of generations. Although I don't know what it's used for, but it must be very valuable." Lin Muyu was speechless. Tang Xiaoxi gently touched his arm and said with a smile, "Since old man is so sincere, then accept it. Otherwise, I'll feel guilty." "All right then." Lin Muyu nodded and put the 2 mysterious gold stones into her Qianquan bag. She cupped her fists and said, "Thank you, old man." The old man smiled slightly. "I should be the one thanking you, young hero. You've saved our entire village. From now on, we can finally live like normal people. I wonder if, young hero, Can you leave some antidotes for us? We still have some people scattered in the jungle at the south of the mountain. Sure. Lin Muyu nodded and said, we'll camp here tonight and set off for the capital tomorrow. I'll take advantage of tonight to refine some antidotes for you. Thank you, young hero. The old man cupped his hands in a trembling manner. His face was full of gratitude. In fact, at his age, he knew that those antidotes were very precious. Most people wouldn't be willing to take them out. However, the young man in front of him was willing to contribute them without hesitation. What a great kindness! At night, piles of bonfires rose by the lake. This village finally lived a real life for the first time. It was probably the first time many villagers had seen fire. They excitedly danced around the bonfire. Although it was hard to tell what kind of dance they were dancing, it was clear that they were very happy. Lin Muyu didn't stay idle. She refined the antidote by the lake. The antidote was very simple. The ratio of soul flower and 7-star flower was 5:5. Adding some water, it was ready. The only difficulty was extracting the essence of the soul flower. This kind of flower was very tender, and if one wasn't careful, the fibers would be damaged. Moreover, the essence was very fine. Without a certain level of ability, an alchemist would not be able to refine the essence. Of course, there was no need to mention Lin Muyu, a freak in the alchemy world. With the king's battle flame, even a tuft of Taishang Laojuan's hair could refine his DNA. A total of over 100 bottles of antidote were refined. 50 of them were given to the old village chief. As a token of gratitude, the old village chief gave a whole roasted lamb to Lin Muyu and the others. This was probably the most profitable business in history. 50 bottles of antidote were worth at least 500,000 gold coins, but a whole roasted lamb wasn't even worth 50 silver coins. Of course, Lin Muyu did not know that the 2 pieces of mystical gold rock that the old man gave him were top-grade inscription materials. If he knew, he would definitely feel that the 50 bottles of detoxification divine water were truly worth it. After a night of rest, the next day, they found a warhorse and set off back to Lanyan City. They had been away for too long. Chapter 488. At the same time, Qihai Province, Luoyang City, Ji Residence. An earthy yellow ray of light soared into the sky, causing the sky to rumble with thunder. At this moment, the power of heaven and earth was actually activated. Countless rays of light slowly descended into the garden in the backyard of the Ji residence. All of the light gathered at a place where a light blue shield was. On the shield, there were a few lines of obscure characters that were suffused with a faint light. Success, it's a high-grade earth tome. A middle-aged man cheered excitedly. Father, after the heavenly imperial gate opened, you should be the first person to write a high-grade earth tome, the first person in the empire. The old man holding the shield was about 70 years old, with a face full of white beard. He smiled with satisfaction and said, with the reopening of the heavenly imperial gate, the spiritual power between heaven and earth has also gathered again. Our Ji residence has waited for thousands of years and finally obtained this opportunity. Today is the day to rebuild our family business. Immediately write a letter and send it to Lanyan City. Report to Her Highness the Empress that I have written a high-grade earth tome. The next day, Lanyan City, Zetian Palace Hall. Qin Yin was dressed in a dark blue dress decorated with fish scale-shaped gems. The stars were very gorgeous, causing this heavenly beauty to shine even more brilliantly. Even though she was not wearing the Empress's robes, she was still extremely dignified, making the ministers wholeheartedly submit to her. But today, the mood of the ministers seemed to be very agitated. Feng Jixing held a scroll in his hand and said, Your Highness, in less than 7 days since the reopening of the heavenly imperial gate, reports of success have been coming in one after another. Prince Qin Yong of Prince Zhong's residence in Yunzhong province has written a low-grade earth tome. Someone from the Lu residence in Cangnan province has written a high-grade earth tome. A few days ago, we received the latest report from Shaoxi. Ji Lin of Ji residence in Qihai province has written a high-grade earth tome. Qin Yin nodded with a smile. Ancient, the Marquis of the Tranquil Sea, Yao Yuan, dressed in a white robe, cupped his fists and said, "Your Highness, the reopening of the heavenly imperial gate and the regathering of the power of heaven and earth will inevitably cause great changes." This old official believes that whether it is the human book, the spiritual book, the earth book, or the heavenly book, or the divine book, they are all powerful enough to change the pattern of the future war. Your Highness should strike first, recruit talents, reopen the heavenly book pavilion, and gather talents who can write spiritual books and above in Lanyan City to serve the empire. Very well, Marquis's words make sense. Qin Yin still had a refreshing and charming smile. Su Muyun cupped his fists and said, "Your Highness, I feel that, if the Heavenly Book Pavilion is to be reopened, we must find a capable and virtuous person to be its manager." Tang Lan nodded as well. This old official thinks so too. Let's appoint the person in charge first before rebuilding the Heavenly Book Pavilion. Once the Heavenly Tome Pavilion is reconstructed, its status will be above that of the Spiritual Medicine Department and be on equal footing with the Divine Temple. Suddenly, Chu Yao, who was dressed in a female official's robe, was a little displeased. She frowned slightly and did not speak. In fact, the empire was in a period of war, and the need for force was far greater than the need for medicine. Moreover, the heavenly tome could attract the power of heaven and earth. Its power was extraordinary, so it was understandable that the heavenly tome pavilion's status was above that of the spiritual medicine department. Qin Yin's pair of intelligent eyes swept over the officials and said, "Minister of Revenue, rebuild Prince Yuning's mansion and turn it into a mansion for the Heavenly Tome Pavilion. All needs will be provided by the Ministry of Revenue. In addition, send letters to Prince Zhong's mansion, Lu's mansion, Ouyang's mansion, and Ji's mansion, inviting their patriarchs and their children to settle down in Lanyan City. The imperial capital will treat them well. As for the position of the Heavenly Tome Pavilion's manager, wait for the people from the 4 families to come." Everyone saluted in unison. Su Muyun said again, "Your Highness, since we have decided to rebuild the Heavenly Tome Pavilion, I think we should strike while the iron is hot. After the Heavenly Tome Pavilion is rebuilt, we should immediately start to select talents and hold the Heavenly Tome Selection Examination to recruit talents for the Empire." Qin Yin nodded lightly. "Then, the preparation for the Heavenly Tome Selection Examination will be fully handled by Grandfather." Su Muyun cupped his hands. "Thank you, Your Highness." Tang Lan was a little displeased, but she did not say much. 3 days later, the imperial capital, Lanyan City, seemed to have become more lively. Countless families and aristocratic families gathered from all over the mainland. All the major inns were full. Even many declining families who planned to rely on the Heavenly Tome Pavilion to revive their family's prestige from thousands of years ago had already settled in Lanyan City. They bought cars, houses, and horses. The population, business, and economy of Lanyan City had rapidly recovered. On the main road about 100 miles away from Lanyan City, 3 people and 3 horses were traveling slowly. The return journey was not too urgent because Lin Muyu had already received Xiao Bai's letter. Chu Yao told him everything about Lanyan City. Phew! Lin Muyu rode on the back of the treading snow warhorse and slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid breath. The dou qi in his body was running more forcefully and steadily. This was the credit of practicing the Vajra protection body. For 3 days, the Vajra protection body had 9 heavens, but Lin Muyu still practiced to the 3rd heavens. The first realm, withered tree roots, was the foundation of the Vajra protection body. With Lin Muyu's martial arts comprehension and current martial arts cultivation, he had already mastered it in just a few hours. The second realm, connecting the Sea of Qi, was not difficult for him at all. The Forging Dragon Bone Remnant Scroll had already connected the dou qi to the Sea of Qi, so Lin Muyu only had to silently recite the mantra of the Vajra protection body a few times to complete it. It was the 3rd realm, embracing the moon, that stumped Lin Muyu. It required the dou qi to connect all the tendons and veins in the body, like washing the marrow and tendons. After 2 days of practice, there were still no results. But at this time, Lin Muyu's arms were slightly folded in front of his chest. His whole body was enshrouded in the king's dou qi. Suddenly, a bright light appeared in his arms, like a bright moon. Tang Xiaoxi could not help but be happy. Mu, you have successfully practiced the embracing the moon? Lin Muyu felt the thick airflow on the surface of his body and the steady feeling coming from all over his body. He could not help but be happy. It seems that I have indeed practiced the third heaven of the Vajra protection body. Bai Yin frowned. I have not even broken through to the second heaven. Commander, did you teach me the wrong mantra? Pei, it is you who is a waste. How can you blame me? Tang Xiaoxi asked with a smile. How do you feel and change after practicing the third heaven of the Vajra protection body? Lin Muyu took a deep breath and said, my breath is longer, and I feel that my body's strength has increased by a lot. The Vajra protection body is indeed the ultimate divine art of defense. It is good that it is effective. Oh right, Xiaoxi. Lin Muyu said. Sister Chu Yao said that Zhe Tian Palace is already planning to rebuild the Heavenly Book Pavilion. That, is the legendary Heavenly Book really that powerful? And it is like this. Tang Xiaoxi nodded and said, 4,000 years ago, the status of the Heavenly Book on the continent was no different from martial arts. The Heavenly Book is divided into 5 levels, which are the Human Book, Spirit Book, Earth Book, Heaven Book, and God Book. The power of the Heavenly Book is also increased. In addition, the Heavenly Book is actually a type of inscription carved on the embryo of a weapon. Once written, there is a certain chance of activating the power of heaven and earth. Only a Heavenly Book that activates the power of heaven and earth can be called a Heavenly Book. Otherwise, it is just a useless book. Once it activates the power of heaven and earth, it can bring about a very strong power. As she said this, Tang Xiaoxi was a little excited and continued with a smile. Legend has it that in a war 6,000 years ago, the empire's ancestor, Qin Zhang, activated the inscription of 3 god books and activated the power of heaven and earth, instantly annihilating more than 50,000 enemies. The power of the Heavenly Book is evident. More than 50,000? Lin Muyu was dumbfounded. Then, I am afraid that the future war will not be the same as before. Yes, Tang Xiaoxi said faintly, the future war will be a battle between power and the Heavenly Book. Whoever has more Heavenly Books in their hands will be able to dominate the war. As she said this, Tang Xiaoxi suddenly smiled again, but there is no need to think so much. After all, there is no peerless genius who can write a god book. It is rare to see one in 10,000 years. Not to mention this is an era where talents are dying. Lin Muyu still felt a lingering fear when she heard the story just now, but she did not say much. Instead, she took out the treasure book of Fuxi's Heavenly Book and studied it repeatedly. Fuxi's Heavenly Book was also a Heavenly Book, but it seemed to be different from the Heavenly Book that Tang Xiaoxi mentioned. Fuxi's Heavenly Book recorded the engraving of armors and shields, and they were all passive abilities. It was completely different from the Heavenly Book that Tang Xiaoxi described that could activate the power of heaven and earth. Forget it, I'll first learn the Fuxi Heavenly Book's engravings. I'll do what I do and love what I do. I can't just learn whatever is stronger. The most important thing is to do one thing well. Moreover, if I can really learn the engraving to the extreme, I should not be inferior to the person who inscribed the Heavenly Book, right? In the evening, they arrived at Lanyan City. There was an endless stream of merchants on the road. Lin Muyu and Tang Xiaoxi were shocked. Although Lanyan City was the trade center of the continent, it was still a little unbearable to be so prosperous. When they entered the city, there was even a long queue outside the city. Merchants from all over the empire were queuing to enter the city. Once the sky turned dark, the city gates would be closed, and they could only spend the night outside the imperial city. Lin Muyu had no intention of queuing. She led Tang Xiaoxi and Bai Yin to the city gates and said loudly, Zhang Wei, open the side gate and let us in. Zhang Wei was holding a roasted chicken and eating it fiercely. When he heard Lin Muyu's voice, he laughed. Commander Yu is back? Someone, open the side gate and let Commander Yu and Princess Shi enter the city. When Lin Muyu entered the city, she saw that the streets were bustling with people from other places. She couldn't help but laugh. What's going on in Lanyan City? Why are there so many people? Zhang Wei rubbed his nose and laughed. That's natural. Duke Yun is about to hold the Heavenly Book Selection examination, and the Empress has already issued an imperial edict. The person who writes the human book will be rewarded with 100 Jinin coins. The person who writes the spiritual book will be rewarded with 1,000 Jinin coins. The person who writes the earthly book will be rewarded with 10,000 Jinin coins. The person who writes the heavenly book will be rewarded with 100,000 Jinin coins, and the person who writes the heavenly book will be immediately conferred the title of nobility. Lin Muyu said resentfully, when I first entered the Saint region, I didn't even get conferred the title of nobility. It seems that writing books these days is much more promising than practicing martial arts. Zhang Wei laughed. Commander, don't be sad. Most of these people who inscribe the heavenly books are weak scholars. Even if they inscribe things like human book, spiritual book, and earthly book on their weapons, shields, and armors, won't we, the soldiers, have to wear the equipment that has become the heavenly book and fight with our lives against the demon race and the Iha nation? That's true, huh? Chapter 489. After returning to the Zetian Palace and meeting with Qin Yin, Chu Yao, Feng Jixing and the others, Lin Muyu immediately returned to the temple. His entire mind was focused on the engraving technique of the Fuxi Heavenly Book. He could not wait any longer. According to his orders, the temple had already prepared a large number of shields and placed them in the head deacon's office. Lin Muyu did not feel tired. After sitting down, he took out a carving knife and opened the Fuxi Heavenly Book. Immediately, the golden book shone with a dazzling light, even brighter than the candlelight at the side. He gently circulated his strength in his palm, and immediately, a thin king's battle flame circled around the exquisite carving knife. This was an engraving technique recorded in the Fuxi Heavenly Book. It used one's own qi and battle qi to concentrate on the carving knife. In reality, it was not the carving knife that cut the object, but the engraver's own strength. This way, the engraving and the user's compatibility would increase. However, it was easier said than done. Lin Muyu's king's battle flame was too overbearing and forceful. In just an hour, he had continuously carved 3 shields. Fortunately, the temple and the Purple Flower Chamber of Commerce had money, so they could still afford it. Take it slow, don't rush. He silently said to himself, his forehead full of sweat. In his heart, he silently recited the mental cultivation method recorded in the Fuxi Heavenly Book. Immediately, the speed of the fiery red dou qi revolving on the carving knife's edge also gradually slowed down along with his state of mind. Sha Sha unceasingly carved on the shield, piles of iron shavings one after another fell to the ground. But this time he still failed. The lines of the solid rock seal were too complicated. One mistake would lead to failure. Looking at the dim solid rock seal, Lin Muyu could not help but feel lonely. However, he was not discouraged and continued to work hard. It wasn't until the rooster crowed in the morning that a ray of light finally appeared on one of the shields. This time, the engraving was successful. After an entire night of engraving, there was only one shield that was successful. However, just as Lin Muyu was about to use the testing crystal to test the perfection level, she was shocked. The number on the testing crystal kept jumping and finally stopped at 94. Heavens, the first successful rank 2 monolith seal was 94% perfection level. Wasn't this a little too shocking? In an instant, the blood in his heart started to boil. He couldn't care about anything else and continued to carve. As if stepping into a new realm, the carving knife in Lin Muyu's hand became smooth. Lin Muyu had already mastered the engraving method recorded in Fuxi's Heavenly Book. Let's call it the Fuxi technique for now. The carving knife in his hands had gradually become an art. With the rustling of iron shavings, the second solid rock seal was successfully engraved. As expected, with the first time, the second time would be easy. After testing, it was 95% perfection level. Lin Muyu's blood was completely boiling. How could he still be sleepy at this time? He immediately took a new shield and started carving the soaring seal according to the rank 3 engraving manual recorded in Fuxi's Heavenly Book. As expected, he broke more than 10 shields in a row. All the way until noon, When Lin Muyu was getting more and more familiar with the soaring seal, she finally managed to inscribe the first soaring seal. It was a perfect 92%, another stunning masterpiece. Looking at the number on the testing crystal, he was in disbelief. Could it be that Fushi's engraving method was really that amazing? It was over 90% perfection level. Thus, after carving 3 more soaring seals with 90% perfection level, he finally believed that this Fushi's heavenly book was indeed a heavenly book. It was simply incomparable. Don't eat or sleep, strike while the iron is hot. He continued to study the rank 4 engraving seal, Absolute Devil Seal. The Absolute Devil Seal was a type of high-level defense system engraving. When engraved on a shield, it could defend against normal attacks from swords and bows. However, it required a mysterious crystal to be embedded in it. Fortunately, there were mysterious crystals in the Holy Hall. There were more than 10 mysterious crystals for him to use. Moreover, the Absolute Devil Seal's engraving was more complicated than the Soaring Seal. It could even be said to be ever-changing. Even the engraving manual in Fushi's heavenly book was very blurry. High-level engraving was ever-changing. Each stroke was not fixed. Only when the engraver's state of mind was in harmony with the engraving and the spiritual sense of heaven and earth could the engraving be successful. In the end, when it was late at night, not a single one was successful. Lin Muyu was not discouraged. There was not much battle energy left in her body and her stomach was rumbling with hunger. However, if she did not carve a successful product, she would not be able to eat. Just as she completed half of the Absolute Devil Seal, a response came from the array. Instantly, Lin Muyu was overjoyed. The array seemed to have a life of its own as it guided Lin Muyu's next carving. Not long after, a perfect circular engraving appeared on the shield. When the mysterious crystal was embedded in it, a bright light burst out. The first rank 4 engraving was a success. Lin Muyu was so excited that she almost fainted. Rank 4 engraving. The number on the testing crystal kept jumping and finally stopped. 97%. This time she was really going to faint. A 97% perfect Absolute Devil Seal. If she took it out, it would definitely scare those arrogant engravers like Wei Miao to death. According to the ranking of engravers, with Lin Muyu's ability to carve a 97% perfect Absolute Devil Seal, she was probably a master engraver. It was like a dream. A Fushi's heavenly book actually allowed her to transform from a novice engraver to a master engraver in 1 day and 1 night. At this time, a conversation between Feng Jixing and Bai Yin could be heard from outside. Feng Jixing said, "You didn't go out for the whole day?" Yes, after the commander came back, he locked himself in his office to practice engraving. "I don't know if he starved to death," Bai Yin said. Feng Jixing was a little displeased. "You should at least send the food in. What are you doing as a personal guard? If you starve Ayu, the commander of the empire, to death, I'll immediately catch you like a thief." Bai Yin was shocked. "General Feng, you can't just arrest people indiscriminately. I'm innocent. Stop talking nonsense. Knock on the door." "Yes." Before Bai Yin could knock on the door, Lin Muyu had already opened the door. She smiled tiredly. "Brother Feng, you're here?" "You? Who?" Feng Jixing looked at him in shock. He then darted into the office and looked around. However, he couldn't find what he was looking for. "Brother Feng, what are you looking for?" Lin Muyu was stunned. Feng Jixing said, "Looking for a woman." "Why would there be a woman in my office?" If you didn't keep 7 or 8 women in your office, how would you become so decadent? I feel like you've been hollowed out." Feng Jixing was a little distressed. "Did you send the women away? At least leave one for Brother Feng." "I'm not a brother." Lin Muyu wanted to die. "What are you thinking about? I've just been engraving for too long. My stamina and battle energy are almost used up. You're too hardworking, kid." Feng Jixing looked at the shields in the room and couldn't help but sigh. Geniuses weren't born. Although Lin Muyu was talented, he had put in more sweat and effort than others. "Bai Yin, tell them to prepare the food and send it over immediately." "Yes, General Feng." Lin Muyu returned to her seat and smiled. "Brother Feng, you didn't come here just for supper, right? Of course not. Feng Jixing touched his nose and said with a smile, the Heavenly Book Pavilion is about to be rebuilt. You should know about this, right? Do you know about the people from the 4 big families? The 4 big families? Lin Muyu was stunned. Feng Jixing nodded. Yes, Prince Zhong's mansion, Ouyang's mansion, Ji's mansion, and Lu's mansion. The masters of these 4 families can engrave the heavenly book above the earthly book. They are known as the 4 big families in Lanyan City. Now the people from these 4 big families have established themselves in Lanyan City. His Highness has rewarded them with a lot of gold, silver, and jewelry. What does Brother Feng mean? The heavenly book. Feng Jixing's expression darkened. The heavenly book is a kind of divine power engraved on weapons, shields, and armors that can trigger the power of heaven and earth. After the opening of the heavenly imperial gate, the heavenly books on the continent that have been silent for many years have awakened one after another. The pattern of the war in the future will also change greatly. As the commander of an army, we must build a good relationship with the 4 big families so that we can get enough heavenly book weapons, shields, and so on from them. I'm afraid that the war in the future will not only depend on wisdom, but also the power of the heavenly book. Lin Muyu shook her head. I just returned to Lanyan City, so I don't know anything about the heavenly book for the time being. Feng Jixing smiled. You're too focused on your own cultivation. These 4 big families have become the existences that the nobles of Lanyan City are fighting to curry favor with. Although we don't have to curry favor with them, we must not offend them. Otherwise, if they don't give us the heavenly book in the future, the combat power of the Longdan army camp and the imperial army will be greatly lower than the other armies. As he spoke, Feng Jixing took a deep look at Lin Muyu and said, both Duke Yun and Duke Lan are trying their best to rope in talents from all sides. We have to be careful. Also, in half a month, the first Heavenly Book selection examination will be held in the Heavenly Book Pavilion. If you're interested, you can also learn to engrave the Heavenly Book. This thing is far more useful than engraving. Got it. Lin Muyu smiled brightly and said, if there's a chance, I'll understand what the Heavenly Book is all about. Don't worry, Brother Feng. I'll learn the Heavenly Book after I've engraved level 7. Oh right, I have a copy of the Vajra protection technique here. Take it and cultivate it. Remember to burn it after you've memorized it. Don't pass it on to too many outsiders. Oh, there's such a good thing? Feng Jixing smiled faintly. I'm not giving it to you for free. Lin Muyu smiled. I'll give you the Vajra protection technique, and you owe me 5 weapons that contain the spiritual power of the Heavenly Book. How about that? Feng Jixing held his forehead and smiled. Good lad, you're really stingy. Alright, I promise you. If all of Feng Jixing's martial arts were offensive, even his purple electric flame wolf was an offensive martial spirit. In reality, his need for the Vajra protection technique was much stronger than Lin Muyu's. Holding the martial manual in his hand, Feng Jixing's heart was filled with mixed feelings. His big brothers seemed to be relying more and more on Lin Muyu's ability. How could he endure this? He could only collect more heavenly books to compensate Lin Muyu. Chapter 490. Time passed day by day. More and more rumors about the tomes of heaven appeared in Lanyan City. The human tomes, earth tomes, and spirit tomes were described as having the ability to penetrate the heavens and the earth. The forces of the 4 major clans had officially entered Lanyan City. In order to attract people's support, Qin Yin issued an edict that the masters of the 4 major clans were allowed to bring weapons into Zhe Tian Palace. In the blink of an eye, 7 days had passed. Lin Muyu had been immersed in the cultivation of the Fuxi Heavenly Tomes. Fuxi's Heavenly Tomes engraving was more about mental cultivation. Step by step, it reached the state of perfection. The carving knife was like a pen. From the beginning, she was one with the pen, then to the mind and pen as one. When Lin Muyu engraved the level 6 Divine Imperial Seal, she finally had a breakthrough. Late at night, in the Temple Grand Deacon's office, Lin Muyu's body was surrounded by the faint light of the king's battle flame. Her pen danced on a shield. It was a complex pattern of the Divine Imperial Seal. As she waved the pen, waves surged in Lin Muyu's Ihai. Countless amounts of seawater shot up into the sky like a curtain of rain. In the midst of the monstrous waves, a huge golden pen stood majestically in her Ihai. Heart Pen. The second realm recorded in Fushi's heavenly tomes. Only those who understood the heart of the pen could engrave a level 6 inscription. Fushi's heavenly tomes had 4 realms: Pen Tip Floating Blade, Heart Pen Out of the Sea, Holy Pen Amaterasu, and Divine Pen Transformation. Today, Lin Muyu had painstakingly cultivated to the second realm. Because of this, she was able to engrave a level 6 inscription. She carefully picked up an azura stone given by Jin Shao. This blood-red gemstone was worth 5,000 Jinin dollars. It was said that it was picked up by an expert from the edge of purgatory. In order to activate the divine imperial seal, the azura stone and the blood fiend gem must be embedded together. When Lin Muyu inserted the azura stone and blood fiend gem into the 2 cores of the formation, the shield in front of her shone brightly. A blood-red array formation floated on the surface of the shield, glowing brightly. This is the Massacre God's seal? Lin Muyu was very excited. She flipped the shield over and buckled it on her arm. Sure enough, after a thick power seeped into her body, the effect of the divine governing seal was to resist coercion. In other words, if she wore such a shield when fighting with a powerhouse above the sanctuary realm, she would have an absolute advantage in terms of momentum and domain. I took the testing crystal and placed it on the shield. The crystal immediately shone brightly, and streams of light converged on the jumping number. Finally, it stopped at a large 93-foot, 93% perfection. He wondered what Wei Miao, Zhang Zhao, and the others would think if he brought this shield to the Purple Yinhua auction house. At this moment, Bai Yin knocked on the door. Commander, manager of the Heavenly Compendium, Lord Ji Lin of the Ji Residence has sent someone to invite you to the Heavenly Compendium's luncheon tomorrow afternoon. Do you agree? Ji Lin? Lin Muyu muttered. The Ji Residence was a family of Heavenly Compendium. Not long after the reopening of the Heavenly Imperial Gate, Ji Lin wrote a high-grade Earth Compendium that shocked the entire Qin Empire. It was also because of this high-grade Earth Compendium that Ji Lin was chosen by Qin Yin to become the #1 person in the Heavenly Compendium. Now that the prestige of the Heavenly Compendium had slightly surpassed that of the Holy Sanctum, Ji Lin still had to give face to Ji Lin. Got it. Let me know in advance when you are about to set off. Yes. The next day at noon, Lin Muyu set off in advance. He brought a few shields with him to the Purple Yinhua auction house. When he placed the shields on the table, Jin Xiaotang was already stunned. Her mouth opened wide. Well, Royal Divine Governing Seal? Oh my God, big brother you, how did you do it? Lin Muyu made a shushing expression and smiled. Help me keep it a secret. Just say that it is the work of a mysterious hermit. I don't want to attract too much trouble because of the engraving. There is enough trouble already. Yes, Xiaotang understands. Jin Xiaotang lifted the heavy shield with difficulty and smiled. The price of this shield is at least 100,000 Jinin coins. Then, do as you see fit. Lin Muyu nodded, then left the room and followed by Yin to the Heavenly Scripture Pavilion. The Heavenly Scripture Pavilion was originally located in Prince Yuning's mansion. However, after Prince Yuning disappeared and Qin Lei died in battle, Qin Yan moved to the Holy Temple and Longdan Army Camp. Thus, he gave up on this mansion and voluntarily offered it to the Empire as the headquarters of the Heavenly Scripture Pavilion. Now, the horizontal board of Prince Yuning's mansion had been removed and replaced with the words, Heavenly Scripture Pavilion, in gold. Outside the mansion, 12 fully armored guards guarded the gate. This level of security was even stricter than the Holy Temple. The 2 horses slowly came to a stop. Lin Muyu dismounted and cupped her fists at a guard. Holy Temple's Lin Muyu is here to keep the appointment. The guard was startled, then immediately performed a military salute and said, So it's Commander Yu. Please come in, the lords of the Heavenly Scripture Pavilion have been waiting for a long time. Lin Muyu nodded and smiled, then led Bai Yin into the gate. Prince Yuning's mansion had been passed down for thousands of years. It was very majestic. An ancient path led straight to the main hall in front. Both sides of the path were lined with osmanthus trees. In the distance, there were already many people standing in the open space in front of the main hall. Most of them were high officials and nobles of the empire. However, what caught Lin Muyu's attention were the rows of huge stone tablets erected in the square. Soon, a man wearing a white brocade robe walked forward. He was about 25 years old, similar to Lin Muyu's age. His face was full of pride, and he held a thin sword in his hand. He smiled and said, "This lord must be the Holy Temple's great deacon, Lady Lin Muyu?" "Yes, I am. May I know who you are?" Lin Muyu felt a little uncomfortable looking at his attire. He really looked like a rich young master. The man cupped his fists and smiled. "I am the third son of the Ouyang clan's patriarch, Ouyang Bao. Nice to meet you, Commander Yu." Lin Muyu nodded. "Young lord is too polite." As she spoke, Lin Muyu still looked at the stone tablet at the side. She saw that there were many golden characters carved on the stone tablet. They formed a string, and there was a mysterious energy enshrouding them. As if seeing through Lin Muyu's confusion, Ouyang Bao smiled and said, "Commander Yu, there is no need to be surprised. These stones are carved with the human book, spirit book, earth book, and heavenly book. They were all contributed by the big families. Many of the heavenly books we wrote were just imitations of these books. I suggest Commander Yu not to read them too much. The characters on the heavenly books are all ancient divine characters. If you read too much, you won't be able to bear it. Moreover, Commander Yu probably can't understand them at all." Lin Muyu squinted her eyes and identified the characters one by one. She was extremely surprised. Why did these divine characters look so familiar? There were even some characters that Lin Muyu could recognize. For example, the wavy character was the word water, the circled character was the word sun, the crescent character was the word moon, and the worm-like character was the word it. These divine characters were actually the Chinese oracle bone script passed down from ancient times in China. How could the oracle bone script be the divine characters of the Shattered Cauldron realm? Lin Muyu was secretly surprised. At the same time, she was even more certain that it must be Qing Emperor Fuxi. He was one of the founders of the Chinese civilization. Now, it seemed that Fuxi was also the founder of the heavenly book. Therefore, the divine characters he used were none other than the oracle bone script. Suppressing the joy in her heart, Lin Muyu placed her hand on the hilt of her sword and slowly followed Ouyang Bao to the front. Suddenly, an official announced loudly, "The great deacon of the divine temple, commander of the Longdan army camp, Lin Muyu has arrived." Everyone turned solemn and looked over. Many of them had only heard of Commander Yu of the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning, but had never seen her in person. This time, they could finally see her in person. And Lin Muyu also saw that there were many people attending this banquet. Feng Jixing, Xiang Yu, Wei Chou, Zhang Wei, and the others were all present. Almost all the martial artists who were above the rank of captaincy, as well as the officials of the Ministry of Personnel and the Ministry of Revenue were also present. Only the Empress, Qin Yin, was not present. Among the crowd, a silver-haired old man wearing a long robe embroidered with golden patterns walked over. He cupped his fists and greeted, "I am Ji Lin, paying my respects to Commander Yu." According to the official position, Ji Lin, the steward of the Heavenly Book Pavilion, was no longer below the commander. Therefore, Lin Muyu did not dare to be rude and immediately cupped her fists and said, "Old Sir Ji Lin, you are overpraising me. Junior Lin Muyu should be paying my respects to Sir." Ji Lin laughed and said, "Commander Yu is truly a famous general who is both brave and wise." Lin Muyu did not know what he meant by this and only smiled apologetically. Ji Lin turned around and cupped his fists at the crowd again. He said, "Dear sirs and generals, today, I have invited everyone to the Heavenly Book Pavilion not just for a simple banquet. I would also like to take this opportunity to demonstrate the power of the Heavenly Book to all the important officials of the Empire. This is to prevent anyone from thinking that the Heavenly Book is merely a deceptive and worthless book." As he spoke, Ji Lin looked at a young man beside him and said, "Shengwu, come and demonstrate the power of the Heavenly Book." "Yes, grandfather." The young man was dressed in light purple soft armor. His face was filled with confidence and pride as he walked to the center of the stage with an imposing appearance. He raised the broadsword in his hand and said, "My name is Ji Shang, the son of Ji Residence's second son, Ji Yun. Dear sirs, Ji Shang will have to be impolite today. Look at the long sword in my hand. This is an artifact embryo with the law of frost inscribed on it. However, this book is a defensive frost shield. Dear sirs, if any of you would like to test the power of the spiritual book, please come and compete with Ji Shang." Everyone in the crowd was stunned. Wei Chou, Bai Yin, and Sidusan all came to Lin Muyu's side. Under Lin Muyu's gaze, they did not intend to make a move. However, the Tang family seemed to be unable to restrain themselves. Tang Lu, who was dressed in embroidered clothes and had a jade belt hanging from his waist, raised his brows and said, "Young Master Ji Shang, is the spiritual book really that powerful?" Ji Shang smiled. "Marquis Westridge can come and try. Let's try." Tang Lu was a heavenly realm expert after all. With a leap, he landed on the empty ground. He did not draw his sword and instead raised his hand to summon his fire fox martial soul. A flame imprint leaped out from his palm. Chapter 491. Buzz. A raging flame encircled Tang Lu's feet. He leaped up and kicked repeatedly at Ji Shang's face. At the same time, the Firefox seal in his palm glowed brighter. He was planning to use the Firefox seal after kicking. It was an undefeatable tactic. However, Ji Shang's face was filled with a disdainful smile. He suddenly flipped the long sword in his hand, and the silver runes on the long sword soared into the sky. There was a faint response from the sky. He had already activated the power of heaven and earth. The surrounding power of the law of ice rapidly surged onto the longsword. Ji Shang shouted, "Power of the spiritual book, frost shield." A huge ice chi shield hovered in front of the long sword. Bang! 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 It shook off Tang Lu's 3 kicks in the air. Tang Lu fell back in a battered and exhausted manner. However, he wasn't willing to accept this kind of humiliation. His body suddenly leaped in the air, and the Firefox seal whizzed out. Good heavens! This playboy has unexpectedly made a breakthrough. Moreover, he has used the 7th layer of the Firefox seal, 5 Chi seal. Boom! The flames surged, and the 5 Chi seal crashed onto the frost shield. However, it was unable to shatter it. Instead, Ji Shang raised his long sword and charged forward. He used the frost shield produced by the spiritual book to smash into Tang Lu's face. Bang! Young Master Tang's face was covered in frost, and he retreated a few steps with a swollen nose. His face immediately turned red. He had lost. Tang Lu. Tang Lan leaned on his walking stick and softly reprimanded, "Don't show off after losing." "Yes, grandfather." Tang Lu could only respectfully stand by Tang Lan's side. Ji Shang raised his long sword, and the power of the spiritual book on the blade slowly dissipated. He cupped his fists and smiled. This is only the power of a high-grade spiritual book. A weapon embryo with a high-grade spiritual book written on it can activate the power of the spiritual book 7 times in its lifetime. Everyone, the might of a spiritual book is already like this. One can only imagine how powerful the stronger earthly book, heavenly book, or even divine book would be. Tang Lan cupped his fists and said, "The might of the heavenly book is indeed admirable." Ji Lin smiled. "Duke Lan is too kind." As he said that, Ji Lin took out a dark green jade flute from his sleeve and said, "This jade flute has the low-grade nether tome profound energy that this old one personally engraved on it. It has not been activated yet. Which general wants to feel the power of the nether tome? It will also broaden the horizons of everyone present. It has been too long since the light of the Book of the Earth has shone on this continent." Lin Muyu frowned but didn't say anything. He could also sense the power of the Earth Tome. Although it wasn't enough to threaten his life, there was no need to challenge the Earth Tome in this kind of situation. Ji Shang took the jade flute from Ji Lin and looked at the group of silent generals. He could not help but laugh. Could it be, no one dares to challenge the might of the Book of the Earth? It seems that it is indeed as expected. The heavenly imperial gate has reopened, and the era of ruling the country by force is about to pass. In the future, this continent will be the world of the heavenly tomes. In the crowd, Zhang Wei suddenly pulled out his sword and said, "Go f***ck yourself. I Zhang Wei am not convinced." Ji Shang laughed heartily. "It's the Imperial Guard's deputy commander, Lord Zhang Wei. Since you are not convinced, why don't you give it a try?" Suddenly, the atmosphere became tense. The people who inscribed the heavenly tomes in the Heavenly Book Pavilion all wanted to obtain a high position in the empire. This was bound to challenge the cultivators who originally held great power. It was inevitable that a battle between a scholar and a martial artist would occur. However, Lin Muyu was very worried about Zhang Wei's safety. If the heavenly tome in Ji Shang's hands was an offensive type, Zhang Wei might die under the might of the Book of the Earth. In the next moment, Lin Muyu slowly walked down the stairs and said, "Why don't you let me try?" "Wait." Feng Jixing slowly walked forward with his sword in hand. He looked straight at Ji Shang and said, "Young Master Ji Shang, my subordinate is a boor. Please forgive him for his words. Since Zhang Wei is my subordinate, let me, the commander, stand up for him." As he spoke, Feng Jixing pulled out his sword. The windcutter's saber glowed brightly. He smiled and said, "Young Master Ji Shang, let me, Feng Jixing, experience the might of the Book of the Earth. How about it?" A trace of displeasure flashed across Ji Shang's eyes. Then he smiled and said, "Since General Feng wishes to experience the might of the Book of the Earth, then come." Feng Jixing let out a soft grunt, and the white imperial forest cloak behind him slowly fluttered. Streaks of fiery red fighting aura continuously appeared around his body. This was the king's fighting flame. It was unknown when he had stepped into the Holy King realm. As expected, a sage did not reveal his true abilities. Everyone retreated. A Holy King realm expert challenging the might of an inferior-grade Book of the Earth was no laughing matter. Ji Shang's cultivation was clearly far inferior to Feng Jixing's. However, there was no fear on his face. It was as if the Book of the Earth in his hand could overcome everything. However, his face was already covered in sweat. It was obvious that activating the might of the Book of the Earth also consumed his vital energy and stamina. He had already activated the high-grade Book of the Earth once. Now, activating the inferior-grade Book of the Earth consecutively was somewhat strenuous. With a light flick of his wrist, the jade flute in Ji Shang's hand emitted a golden light that soared into the sky. It caused an earthen yellow light to descend from the sky and continuously gather on the jade flute. In the blink of an eye, the power of heaven and earth turned into raging flames that surged towards Feng Jixing's body. Power of the Book of the Earth, raging flames. Ji Shang shouted angrily. He had already launched his attack. He knew that his opponent was Feng Jixing, a Holy King realm expert. Thus, this attack seemed to have used up all the heaven and earth spiritual energy in the Book of the Earth. The raging flames whizzed forward, but Feng Jixing had no intention of dodging. He bent his body slightly, and his king's combat flame whizzed into his battle saber. At the same time, the purple electric flame wolf howled continuously as he executed the demonic blade devourer. Boom! The raging flames clashed with the raging winds and lightning. Immediately, the civil officials fled in fear. Only Lin Muyu, Xiang Yu, Situ Sen, and the other experts remained unmoved. They stood there like mountains. The whistling winds blew against Lin Muyu's white cloak. She narrowed her eyes, and a faint glow of the dragon blood shield appeared in front of her to offset the impact of the Book of the Earth's power. The raging flames continued to surge from the jade flute and attack his opponent. Meanwhile, Feng Jixing raised his windcutter, and the king's combat flame around him burned even more intensely. Step by step, he faced the raging flames head-on. Under the impact of the raging flames, his face turned slightly pale, but the determination in his eyes didn't change. He suddenly opened his hand, and his powerful left hand grabbed the tip of the jade flute. Then he let out a low roar. Bang! The jade flute shattered. The carrier of the Book of the Earth, the jade flute, had already shattered. Immediately, The earthen yellow light in the sky disappeared without a trace. The jade flute in Feng Jixing's hand had already turned into dust. Wisps of jade powder flew from between Feng Jixing's fingers like quicksand. After Ji Shang lost the Book of the Earth, he was directly faced with Feng Jixing's oppressive aura. Immediately, he couldn't move, and his face was covered in sweat. Feng Jixing slowly scattered the jade flute's powder and smiled. Looks like it's still too early for the Book of the Earth to replace the Divine Temple. Only after Feng Jixing's oppressive aura dissipated did Ji Shang take a deep breath and take a few steps back. His face was pale. The situation just now was as if he had walked through the 18 levels of hell. The corners of Xiang Yu's mouth curled up into a faint smile, but he didn't say anything. On the other hand, Lin Muyu's spirit pulse technique could clearly sense that Feng Jixing's king's fighting flame was at least 20% weaker than before. A mere low-grade Book of the Earth had actually exhausted 20% of his power. Based on this principle, 5 low-grade books of the Earth would probably be enough to exhaust Feng Jixing's power. It seemed that there was a reason why the Book of the Earth was so popular on the mainland. When Feng Jixing's handsome face was covered in sweat and he stood beside Lin Muyu, he said in a low voice, "My God, the Book of the Earth is indeed powerful. Damn it." Lin Muyu nodded and smiled. "Who asked you to show off? I was worried that a heartless brat like you would embarrass yourself. You are the Divine Temple's Grand Deacon, a god in the eyes of the Empire's martial artists. Naturally, you cannot lose to the Book of the Earth. I am just a small commander of the Imperial Guards. It is not embarrassing even if I lose," Feng Jixing said with conviction. Lin Muyu knew what he was thinking and grinned. "All right, count it on me this time. I owe you a favor." "Heh, that's more like it." The destruction of the Book of the Earth had somewhat embarrassed the Heavenly Book Pavilion's manager, Ji Lin. Fortunately, Feng Jixing knew how to conduct himself and handle matters. He cupped his fists in a salute from afar and said apologetically, "Swords have no eyes. I, Feng Jixing, have accidentally destroyed the Book of the Earth. Please forgive me, Sir Manager. However, I will not compensate you. A Book of the Earth is priceless. I, Feng Jixing, am an honest and clean official. I do not have that much money to compensate you." The crowd roared with laughter. Ji Lin was also carefree. He cupped his fists and said, "General Feng, what are you saying? Swords have no eyes in a contest. This old man is already very grateful that you did not injure Ji Shang." As he spoke, Ji Lin's eyes revealed a trace of coldness. He said, "However, the Heavenly Imperial Gate has not been opened for long. Many divine characters have been lost on the continent. It will take some time for the power of heaven and earth to gather again. Therefore, for the time being, there is no one in the Heavenly Book Pavilion who can write a book of the Heavenly Book. If someone can write a book of the Heavenly Book, I hope that General Feng can test the sharpness of the Book of the Heavenly Book again." This was undoubtedly a provocation. At the same time, it was also a way to defend the Heavenly Book Pavilion. Feng Jixing did not say anything. He cursed in his heart, "Lin, you old fox. You want to use the Book of the Heavenly Book to torture me? Dream on. If we were on the battlefield, I would have taken your life with a flying knife long ago. Would I give you the chance to draw on the power of heaven and earth? Childish." Not long after, the lunch banquet began. The tense atmosphere had also eased up a lot. Not long after the banquet began, a familiar and melodious voice came from outside. It was Tang Xiaoxi. "Princess, she has arrived." The disciples shouted loudly. Everyone looked over. Many of them had only recently arrived in Lanyan City and had not seen the legendary second most beautiful woman in the world. Under everyone's gaze, Tang Xiaoxi walked in wearing a red fur soft armor, a white animal skin skirt, and golden cloud boots. She held a fiery whip in her hand. There was a faint smile on her beautiful face. In an instant, the dull banquet became radiant. "Shao Shi greets grandfather." Tang Xiaoxi bowed to Tang Lan in a ladle-like manner. Tang Lan's face was full of doting. "Shao Shi is here. Good. Take a seat." However, Tang Xiaoxi did not sit beside Tang Lan. Instead, she sat on the floor beside Lin Muyu's table and said with a smile, "I'm late?" How was the Heavenly Book Conference? Did you see the power of the Heavenly Book? It's really King powerful? Lin Muyu said in a low voice. Tang Xiaoxi giggled. Moo, I want to learn the Heavenly Book inscription too. Not far away, a nobleman raised his head with a face full of smiles. If Princess she wants to learn the Heavenly Book inscription, I, Ouyang Bao, am willing to overstep my authority and be your temporary teacher. He was the third young master of the Ouyang family. It was said that Ouyang Bao had already written 2 spiritual books and was considered one of the best among the younger generation. However, Tang Xiaoxi did not buy it. She pouted and said, Moo, why don't you learn the Heavenly Book inscription with me? Cultivation is so boring anyway, right? She actually had no intention of paying attention to Ouyang Bao at all. Chapter 492. Ouyang Bao's face was filled with resentment as he sat back down at the table. His gaze towards Lin Muyu was filled with jealousy and hatred. It was obvious that a perfect woman like Princess she should have stayed by his side, but now, Princess Xi's small hands were placed on Lin Muyu's legs, and she was actually acting coquettishly towards him. This almost made Ouyang Bao's heart burn with jealousy. Let's learn then. Lin Muyu had seen the power of the heavenly tomes. Even though it was only a spiritual tomes and a low-grade earthly tomes, it would be a lie to say that she wasn't tempted. All right, let's learn together. Tang Xiaoxi was extremely excited and said, I'll go to the dragon-seeking merchant guild to ask for a few pieces of earthly tomes and heavenly tomes and learn together. How about that? All right, let's learn the divine text first. Oh, I'm so smart and have a photographic memory. I'll definitely learn very quickly. Tang Xiaoxi boasted proudly. Lin Muyu glanced at her and didn't know how to refute. But at this moment, Ouyang Bao sneered and said, Let's not talk about how difficult it is to remember the strokes of the divine text. Even if you remember it, it's futile if you can't enter the state of mind of the heavenly tomes. Our Ouyang family has studied the heavenly tomes for generations. Even if we couldn't activate the power of heaven and earth for 4,000 years, we never gave up. Learning the heavenly tomes isn't that easy. I think, Commander, you should start learning from the Divine Text Interpretation Encyclopedia. Lin Muyu frowned and ignored his provocation. She continued to eat and drink. On the other hand, Tang Xiaoxi was full of enthusiasm and vowed to buy a few pieces of the heavenly tomes back to share with Qin Yin. As for Lin Muyu, his thoughts were actually very simple. He didn't want to bite off more than he could chew. He was currently at the most crucial stage of studying inscription and didn't have the energy to learn the inscription of the heavenly tomes before he could inscribe the level 7 inscription. But on second thought, inscription of the heavenly tomes was actually inscribing words on the tool embryo to activate the power of heaven and earth. In a sense, it was similar to inscribing. One was inscribing the divine text while the other was inscribing the diagram of a profound formation. After the sun set, the instructors and sparring partners in the divine sanctums stopped their training. Instead, they stayed in their residences to cultivate their mental states. Only the roars of ferocious tigers and swift wolves could be heard coming from the beast taming department. After Lin Muyu imparted the art of beast taming, the number of wild beasts in the beast taming department had increased. However, they were just a bunch of tamed wild beasts that recognized their masters. They would not harm anyone. Dong Dong. In the Sacred Temple Grand Deacon's office, Lin Muyu was familiarizing himself with the Level 7 God-Slaying Seals illustration handbook when there was a knock on the door. Bai Yin lowered his voice and said, Lord, Her Highness Yin and Princess Xi are here. Please come in. Yes. The door opened, bringing with it the cold wind of a winter night. Qin Yin and Tang Xiaoxi, both wearing black cloaks embroidered with gold, walked in. Behind them, a few royal guards walked in with a huge stone tablet in their arms. Lin Muyu had seen this kind of stone before. It was the model of the heavenly tomes. It was an existence that could activate the power of heaven and earth. However, because it was carved on stone, the tool embryo was not chosen well, so it could only be used as a model. Xiao Yin Xiao Shi, you guys are... Lin Muyu was speechless. Qin Yin burst into laughter. Her beautiful eyes were full of moving stars. She said with a smile, Xiaoxi said she wanted to learn the heavenly tomes, so I followed along. I'm borrowing your territory. You don't have any objections, right? No, no. After the door was closed, there were only 3 people left in the room. Qin Yin and Tang Xiaoxi each held a steel longsword in their hands. Then they took out a brush. It was a special kind of brush. It was hollow and could only be used to inscribe the heavenly tomes on the tool embryo after adding some materials. Lin Muyu was surprised when she saw Tang Xiaoxi filling the engraving brush with a pile of silver powder. She couldn't help but ask, "What's that?" Profound silver powder. It contains spiritual energy. Only the divine runes carved with it can activate the power of heaven and earth, Qin Yin answered on her behalf with a smile. It's expensive, isn't it? Lin Muyu asked. 300 gold yin coins per caddy. That's very expensive. Lin Muyu secretly clicked her tongue. Only the rich could come up with the heavenly tomes. Ordinary people couldn't afford to learn it at all. Lin Muyu focused on the engraving. After a while, she felt a little tired and took a look at Qin Yin and Tang Xiaoxi's heavenly tomes. In the end, the 2 of them each flipped through a copy of the Divine Text Translation Encyclopedia. The book was filled with tiny characters. The heavenly tomes had to be written in the divine text, but in Lin Muyu's eyes, these divine texts were the legendary oracle bone inscriptions. They were only slightly different. To write a heavenly tomes, one had to follow a rule. First, one had to choose an attribute. The heavenly tomes were divided into 8 main rules: wind, fire, thunder, earth, ice, light, life, and space. One had to choose one of them and then use words to describe it. As long as one's state of mind and writing skills were up to par, one could activate the power of heaven and earth. However, this was extremely difficult. She glanced at one of the heavenly tomes written by Qin Yin, Storm. An endless bone-chilling wind tore everything in the world apart. It seemed to be not bad, but it wasn't deep enough. Looking at the 2 heavenly tomes written by Tang Xiaoxi, Lin Muyu instantly laughed. Flame. A raging flame hotter than a barbecue skewer. It burned all the idiots. Lightning. A sudden clap of thunder from the sky. A bolt of lightning killed a large group. Lin Muyu couldn't help but laugh out loud. Tang Xiaoxi raised her head and looked at him. Her face instantly turned red. She glared at him and said, "Idiot, don't peek. This is only a half-finished product." Lin Muyu held back her laughter and said, "Xiaoxi, I bet 10 Jining coins that your sword must have gone astray and can't activate the power of heaven and earth. I think you should just write according to the model. Just you wait and see." Tang Xiaoxi's brush moved quickly, leaving shallow marks on the body of the sword. The mystic silver powder slowly seeped into the body of the sword and couldn't be washed away. However, after Tang Xiaoxi finished writing the entire sentence, there was no movement. There was no sign of activating the power of heaven and earth at all. She pursed her lips and turned to look at the divine text written by Qin Yin. Her face instantly turned even redder. Qin Yin wrote even more seriously. Every symbol was very correct, unlike the messy writing by Tang Xiaoxi. Lin Muyu stopped looking at it and continued to study the God-slaying seals illustration handbook. After an unknown amount of time, Lin Muyu suddenly raised her head. Her heart skipped a beat. An extremely powerful force from the spirit pulse technique was actually less than 10 meters away from her. She didn't even know when the other party had arrived. "Who is it?" He abruptly stood up, the king battle flames surging out of his body, the 7 luminaries' holy gourd and the god-binding chains breaking out of his body and circling around him. At the same time, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the sword hanging on the sword rack. "What's wrong?" Qin Yin and Tang Xiaoxi's eyes widened. They didn't realize it. This could only mean that the person's cultivation was far above theirs. Bang! With a loud bang, a large hole appeared in the window at the side. A man in a black robe spun around and raised his palm without saying a word. A fiery red martial soul appeared on his arm and it buzzed loudly. His palm was filled with raging flames as it flew towards Lin Muyu. Lin Muyu didn't back down. With a roar, the power of the 5 great mountains gathered on her blade and swept out. Boom. The energy exploded, flipping the tables and chairs in the office and causing documents to fly everywhere. Lin Muyu held her sword and took a few steps back. An invisible force descended from the sky. It was the Divine Heaven Realm. The person was actually a Divine Heaven Realm expert. He stood proudly in the air with his arms crossed in front of his chest. A fiery red fan appeared around his body. His face couldn't be seen clearly under the cloak. He smiled and said in an old voice, "You're the current head deacon of the Divine Palace, Lin Muyu?" "Or you?" Lin Muyu held the star sword in her hand and had a cold expression. "Someone who wants to test your abilities." The person laughed. At the side, Tang Xiaoxi had already transformed into the nine-tailed demon fox. She threw away her engraving pen and took out the nation-suppressing whip. Qin Yin also summoned the true dragon god binding chains and held the bright heaven-suppressing sword in her hand. She was ready to attack. "Xiao Yin, Xiao Shi, don't move. I'll do it myself." Lin Muyu could not help but rejoice in his heart. To have such a strong opponent as his opponent made him incomparably excited. Furthermore, this person came to challenge him openly and did not attack him secretly. It seemed like they were not mortal enemies. "Ha, good," the elder shouted in a low voice. The flames in his palms became even more intense. He raised his hands and the fan danced around his arms, emitting a shrill sound. When Bai Yin and the others pushed open the door and entered, they were stunned. However, they didn't make a move under Qin Yin's gaze. On the other hand, Lin Muyu used 100% of her power. Her two martial souls quickly disintegrated and fused. She took out the seven luminaries' celestial sword, and her aura and power instantly soared. Even the elder made an "oh" sound and laughed. Martial soul fusion? Interesting. By the time his palm landed, Lin Muyu had already swung her sword a second time. First starlight. Boom. Flames surged and exploded. The impact was so strong that everyone couldn't even open their eyes. The head deacon's office was also on the verge of collapse. The walls were starting to crack. If the two of them used another move, the entire palace would probably collapse. Sha sha sha, Lin Muyu was forced back by her opponent's powerful Sage Heaven Realm power. The elder also spun in the air and retreated a few meters. This move still didn't decide the victor. "Who are you?" Lin Muyu asked with a cold expression. The elder laughed. His laughter was filled with benevolence. "Let's stop fighting. Otherwise, the holy temple won't be able to withstand our power." He slowly lifted his cloak. His face was pale, but his eyes were shining brightly as he looked at Lin Muyu. At the door, Gu Yang suddenly staggered. He supported himself with his walking stick and said in a trembling voice, Your head deacon Xianyuan Hong. You're back?" The person who came was another head deacon of the holy temple besides Lei Hong. "Deacon Gu Yang, it's been 15 years. How have you been?" Xianyuan Hong smiled. Gu Yang was extremely excited. "Yes, I'm fine." Lin Muyu was dumbfounded. Xianyuan Hong landed on the ground and knelt on one knee. He bowed to Qin Yin and said in a low voice, "I, Xianyuan Hong, have traveled the northern desert for 15 years. I've finally made some progress in my cultivation. Please forgive me for being late to rescue you, Your Highness." Chapter 493. Your great deacon Xianyuan Hong? Qin Yin was stunned. "Yes." Xianyuan Hong didn't get up. He cupped his fists and said, "This old subject has been traveling and cultivating in the desert. I only returned to the Empire after I reached the Saint Heaven Realm, but I didn't expect so many things to happen. Your Highness, you were only 9 years old when this old subject left Lanyan City? That's right, time really flies." Qin Yin flew forward and helped Xianyuan Hong up. "Great Deacon Xianyuan Hong, there's no need to be so courteous. You're Xiao Yin Sr., so there's no need to be so courteous in the future." Xianyuan Hong nodded and said respectfully, "Yes, Your Highness." Qin Yin asked, "Great Deacon, does anyone else know that you've returned to Lanyan City?" "No one else." This old subject heard along the way that the current great deacon of the Holy Temple is a young expert who isn't even 30 years old. He was conferred as one of the 4 heroes of Lan Yen by the former emperor, so this old subject immediately returned to the Holy Temple after so many years to test out this young great deacon's skills. Xianyuan Hong cupped his fists at Lin Muyu and said, "After trying, I realize that Yu's strength is indeed well-deserved. Even though he's only at the Holy King realm, he's actually on par with this old man's Saint Heaven realm." Lin Muyu said humbly, "Great Deacon is too humble. It's just that the fight was rather hasty and I had the advantage of having 2 martial souls. If the fight had dragged on, the Holy King realm's battle chi wouldn't have lasted as long as the Saint Heaven realms, and I would have definitely lost." Tang Xiaoxi pursed her lips and said, "I'm afraid not. Mu's 7 luminaries' profound force is one of the best in the world. If she used the 7 luminaries' profound force, I'm afraid she would have been able to defeat Great Deacon Xianyuan Hong before her battle chi ran out." Lin Muyu couldn't help but laugh in her heart. Tang Xiaoxi really didn't know how to chat. Qin Yin and Bai Yin were doing their best to stifle their laughter. However, Xianyuan Hong did not get angry. Instead, he looked kindly at Tang Xiaoxi and said, "When I was fighting with you earlier, this young lady had been accumulating her power and was ready to strike. If I'm not mistaken, you must be Tang Lan's granddaughter, Princess Tang Xiaoxi?" Tang Xiaoxi nodded. Xianyuan Hong couldn't help but chuckle. "Xiao Shi, I've even attended your birthday banquet. You were also there when I left Lanyan City. You were only 8 years old, 1 year younger than Her Highness." Tang Xiaoxi blushed and didn't know how to respond. Qin Yin, on the other hand, said in a more appropriate manner, "Since Great Deacon Xianyuan Hong has returned to Lanyan City, there will definitely be an appointment for you. If Great Deacon doesn't mind, Xiao Yin will confer you the title of first-rank general. I wonder if Great Deacon is willing." Xianyuan Hong actually shook his head and refused. "Your Highness, this old subject doesn't know the art of war and only knows how to cultivate. If I lead an army to war, wouldn't I be misleading the country and its people? So, it's better for this old subject to stay in the Divine Temple. I'll write martial arts manuals and nurture top experts to provide your Highness and the Empire with more elite soldiers and good generals. What do you think, Your Highness?" Qin Yin nodded and didn't object. Tang Xiaoxi looked at Xianyuan Hong with her beautiful eyes and then looked at Lin Muyu. She said, "But there can't be 2 tigers on the same mountain. The current Great Deacon of the Divine Temple is Mu. If Great Deacon Xianyuan Hong comes back to take charge, won't there be a conflict?" Xianyuan Hong was taken aback. He hurriedly cupped his fists and said, "This old subject is willing to be demoted to a deacon. All I ask is to stay in the Divine Temple and serve your Highness." Lin Muyu frowned and said respectfully, "Elder Xianyuan Hong, there's actually no need for that. Back then, because Grandpa Lei Hong died for the country, there was no one in Lanyan City who was qualified to be the Great Deacon. That was why I took up the position at the last minute. Now that you've returned, I can give up my position as the Great Deacon. In terms of experience and martial arts cultivation, I'm no match for you. You'll be able to convince the masses. Therefore, Yu is willing to give up the position of the Great Deacon." Tang Xiaoxi frowned and did not say anything. Qin Yin bit her red lips. Her beautiful eyes were filled with reluctance. Finally, she nodded and said, "All right then. Commander, you will give up the position of the Great Deacon and focus on leading the troops. In addition, all the troops trained by the other Divine Temple branches within the Empire will be under Commander Yu's command. I hope Great Deacon Hong can agree to this." Xianyuan Hong cupped his fists and said, "This old subject obeys." As he spoke, Xianyuan Hong looked at Lin Muyu and said, "Yu is a rare martial arts prodigy. This old subject hopes that you can stay in the Divine Temple and take up the position of a deacon. The Divine Temple needs a pinnacle expert like you to hold the fort." In fact, Lin Muyu had long been annoyed by the Great Deacon's dossiers and trifles. At this moment, he simply tossed them all away and said, "I have not left the Divine Temple. How about this? I will still be a gold star sparring master of the Divine Temple. When I have time, I will still return to the Divine Temple to accompany the instructors in their training. What do you think, Great Deacon? Xianyuan Hong said, Then it will be hard on you. It's fine. Lin Muyu raised his hand and removed the golden leaf from his chest. From today onwards, he was no longer the Great Deacon of the Divine Temple. Although he did not say anything, he was more or less displeased. In any case, he had been holding the fort for 2 years. If he were to give up just like that, he would feel uncomfortable. Qin Yin saw this and her heart ached for Lin Muyu. She walked forward and held his hand, saying softly, It has been hard on you. Don't blame Xiao Yin, it's fine. Lin Muyu looked at Bai Yin with some annoyance and ordered, Get the people from the Longdan army camp to come over and help me tidy up the personal belongings in the Great Deacon's office. Make an office for Great Deacon Xianyuan Hong. Also, make a room for me in the barracks of the Longdan army camp. I will be living in the barracks of the Longdan army camp from now on. Bai Yin cupped his fists and said, Yes, this subordinate will obey. At night, the stars in the sky were dim. Lin Muyu carried 2 sets of armor on his shoulders, both of which were his own successful engravings. His white imperial forest cloak fluttered in the wind behind him, and he held the Snowstrider warhorse in his left hand. He seemed somewhat desolate and lonely. He knew that Xianyuan Hong had returned, and that he was a divine heaven realm expert. This was a great thing for Qin Yin and the Empire, but it was not a good thing for him. After all, he would have to return his position as the Great Deacon of the Divine Palace. However, it was not a big deal, and he would just have to suffer a little. Moreover, the soldiers, instructors, and sparring masters of the Divine Palace were mostly his people. Even if Xianyuan Hong had returned, the Divine Palace would still be under his control. Qin Yin and Tang Xiaoxi followed him to the Longdan Army Camp's camp. The 1st Battalion's camp was behind the Divine Palace, and there were countless houses where the brave warriors lived. Lin Muyu's room was arranged in the most spacious and dignified back hall. After all, she was the commander of the Longdan Army Camp, so this kind of treatment was inevitable. At daybreak, Qin Yin and Tang Xiaoxi went back to sleep, and Lin Muyu also slowly fell asleep. The battle qi in her body gradually became dormant, but the Forging Dragon Bone Remnant Scroll and Diamond Body Protecting Technique continued to circulate. The next day, a piece of news spread throughout Lanyan City, causing a huge uproar. The Purple Flower Chamber of Commerce was selling a level 6 shield inscribed with the Divine Imperial Seal. Divine Imperial Seal, these 3 words weighed 1,000 pounds, and it was a profound seal that only a king-level engraver could inscribe. For a moment, the Purple Flower Chamber of Commerce was filled with a sea of people. Countless people came to see this sacred artifact shield, inscribed with the Divine Imperial Seal. In the afternoon, the auction began, and this shield with the Divine Imperial Seal was the grand finale. The entire auction house was crowded with people. Jin Xiaotang was wearing a fine white soft armor inlaid with fur, a short white skirt, and a pair of snow-white boots. She stood on the high stage, looking like a beautiful fairy in the snow. She held a long blade in her hand, and her face was full of smiles as she said, This long blade has the Dragon Slayer's seal inscribed on it, and when it is brandished, it can release dragon force to attack the opponent. It is an offensive type treasure. The long blade itself is also a treasure of the 1st rank of the spirit grade, so the starting price is 30,000 Jinin coins. Let's start. The people below the stage began to bid, and the first auction item made everyone excited. Dragon Slayer Seal, level 5 inscription, could only be activated after embedding a Dragon Heart Stone. Equipment with the Dragon Slayer Seal could withstand a certain degree of Dragon Flame attack, and at the same time, it could also release a small amount of Dragon Force attack. This was definitely not a flashy weapon. Moreover, the person who could inscribe the level 5 Dragon Slayer Seal was at least an inscribing guru level grade inscriber. No one would have thought that there would be an inscribing guru level inscribing guru in Lanyan City in addition to the king inscribing guru. At the backstage of the auction, Wei Miao squinted his eyes and looked at Jin Xiang, his face full of displeasure. Zhang Zhao, who was at the side, said with a cold gaze, The opening auction item and the finale have all been snatched away by someone else. Just who is it? to actually be able to inscribe the divine control seal. Young Master Wei, could it be your father? Wei Miao shook his head slowly. Impossible, my father has not reached the cultivation of a king-level inscriber. This? Who could it be? I don't know, but one thing is for sure, it must be a hidden expert. Let's wait and see. What they did not know was that the hidden expert was currently in the commander's tent of the valiant dragon army, snoring thunderously and drooling at the corner of his mouth. In the end, the long saber with the Dragon Slayer seal was sold for a sky-high price of 250,000 Genin dollars, and was bought by the young master of the Tiger General's residence. He must have wanted to use this long saber to stand out in the war against the Nephilim and Iha Nation in the future. However, if a Tiger General could take out 250,000 Genin dollars, it meant that his background was definitely not clean. It was just that no one had investigated him. Another dozens of auction items were sold one by one. At this time, many people in the crowd were already shouting, "Miss Xiaoying, we want to see the Divine Imperial Seal." Divine Imperial Seal. The time was ripe. Jean Xiaoying took a shield from the servant's hand and held it in her hands with great difficulty. She smiled and said, "All right, this shield can only be considered as a superior grade artifact as a prototype artifact, but it is engraved with the Divine Imperial Seal, which means it is destined to be a divine artifact. The starting price is 200,000 Genin coins." As she said that, Jean Xiaoying gathered vital energy in her palm and lightly brushed the surface of the shield. Instantly, a golden light shot up into the sky. The energy of the Divine Imperial Seal was indeed mighty. Everyone's emotions were instantly ignited. In the crowd, an old man in a gray cloak with a grizzled beard slowly lifted the hood of his cloak and looked at the Divine Imperial Seal on the stage. He said calmly, "Xing, we must buy this shield no matter what. I want to see who can engrave the Divine Imperial Seal." Engraving and heavenly writing are of the same origin. If this person who can engrave the Divine Imperial Seal changes his profession to writing heavenly writing, what will happen? Yes, Grandpa. Chapter 494. 250,000 Genin dollars. Someone in the crowd raised his arm. It was Xue Ling, the son of the Minister of War and a captaincy of the Seven Seas City Army. He was a deputy general and could be considered a high-ranking general. 280,000 Genin dollars. Another voice came from a bearded mercenary. No one knew where he came from, but his cultivation was not high, so the shield was useless to him. 500,000 Genin dollars. Suddenly, someone in the crowd shouted, drawing everyone's attention. The person who shouted was Ji Shang, the young master of the Heavenly Book Pavilion's Ji residence. Those who knew him would immediately recognize the old man beside him as Ji Lin, the manager of the Heavenly Book Pavilion, one of the most powerful people in the empire. Jean Xiaoying also recognized Ji Shang and smiled. "All right, young master Ji Shang bids 500,000 Genin dollars. Is there a higher bid?" 600,000 Genin dollars. The voice came from a young master in embroidered clothes. It was Ouyang Bao, the third son of the Heavenly Book aristocratic family, the Ouyang family. Ouyang Bao? Ji Lin couldn't help but frown as he said in a low voice, "It seems that the Ouyang family is also very interested in this divine governing seal. Xing, continue to bid. Don't lose to them. We must get the shield." "Yes, Grandpa." Ji Shang immediately raised his voice and shouted, 700,000 Genin dollars. The two aristocratic families began to challenge each other, and the rest could only remain silent. After all, the Empress had spent a lot of money to invite the Ji residents and the Ouyang family to Lanyan City. The Ministry of Revenue had even allocated a total of 8 million Genin dollars to the Ji residents, while the Ouyang family only received 4 million Genin dollars. In order to win over these Heavenly Book aristocratic families, Qin Yin had spent a lot of money. Furthermore, she had given them money and titles of nobility. Ouyang Bao narrowed his eyes. The servant beside him looked at him and seemed to think that the price was too high. However, Ouyang Bao ignored the servant's gaze and continued raising his arm. 1 million Genin dollars. Continue bidding. Ji Lin narrowed his eyes and clenched his fists. Ji Shang continued to shout at the top of his lungs, 1,500,000 Jinin coins. No matter how one looked at it, Ji Shang was a prodigal son. However, Ji Lin only narrowed his eyes and did not speak. This price was still within his acceptable range. If he could comprehend something from the divine seal, he might be able to surpass the earthly book and write a heavenly book. When that time came, not to mention 5 million, even 3 million would be worth it. In the end, when 5 million was shouted, Ouyang Bao felt a little guilty. His face was covered in sweat. After wiping it with his sleeve, he gritted his teeth and shouted, 6 million. He didn't have that much money anymore. This shout was just to boost his morale. Ji Shang sneered and raised his arm. 2 million Jin coins. The scene was silent. Everyone was frightened. No matter how high the value of a level 6 Imperial Divine Seal was, it could not be so high. After all, it was just an engraving of a passive ability. If it could be sold for 1 million, it would already be the real price. If it could be sold for 2 million, it would already be an inflated price. This time, Ouyang Bao did not say anything and sat down dejectedly. Jin Xiaotang waited for a while and smiled happily. It's settled. Young Master Ji Shang of the Ji residence has bid 2 million. Please follow me to the backstage for the transaction. Ji Shang nodded and followed Jin Xiaotang in high spirits. However, the auction house was filled with booze. Spending 2 million on a lousy shield, I think he's either rich or stupid, a jealous person said. As expected of the Heavenly Heart Pavilion's Ji residents. They are rich and overbearing. It is said that the family head, Ji Lin, can obtain tens of thousands of Jin dollars from the Empress just by writing a book. That young Master Ji Shang is young and handsome, and he can actually write a spiritual book. It would be great if I could marry him. The Zine Flower Chamber of Commerce is indeed powerful. They can even get the work of a king's sealer. It seems like the Dragon Search Chamber of Commerce is going to lose. Jin Xiaotang's breasts are getting more and more mature. I really want to touch them. In the afternoon, a group of members of the Chamber of Commerce rode fast horses into the Longdan army camp. Jin Xiaotang dismounted and happily entered Lin Muyu's room. Her bell-like laughter bloomed. Brother Yu, guess how much the Imperial Divine Seal shield was sold for? How much? Lin Muyu asked with a smile. You guess. 500,000? That's too low. 1 million? It's still too low. 5 million? Lin Muyu could not close her mouth. Higher, Jin Xiaotang said with a smile. Don't tell me it's 2 million? Lin Muyu was pleasantly surprised. You guessed it right. It's 2 million. Jin Xiaotang giggled. Lin Muyu stood up from her seat happily and threw Jin Xiaotang into her arms. The girl was so scared that her heart was in a mess. When Lin Muyu successfully caught her, she jumped down from Lin Muyu's arms and said with a smile, Brother Yu, we will definitely win today's auction house battle. It is said that the Dragon Search Chamber of Commerce's auction house is deserted today. There are not many people at all. That's naturally the best. Lin Muyu squinted and said, The problem now is, Ji Lin is the manager of the Heavenly Book Pavilion, and the Ji residence is a famous residence in the Seven Seas province. Ji Lin and Tang Lon are also very close. With the friendship between Tang Lon and Ji Lin, maybe the Dragon Search Chamber of Commerce will sell the tool embryo of the Heavenly Book inscription soon. Yes, I am also worried about this problem. Jin Xiaotang sat on a seat at the side, crossed her white legs, and said, The gate of Heavenly Imperial Army has reopened, and the power of heaven and earth has returned to the Shattered Cauldron realm. Those aristocratic families of the Heavenly Book are like seedlings that have dried up for thousands of years, longing for the rain and dew of the Empress, eager to rise. Therefore, during this period of time, the price of the tool embryo of the Heavenly Book will definitely rise. We have to stock up some goods as soon as possible to keep up with the changes. I have already bought a large batch of the mysterious gold powder, mysterious silver powder, mysterious iron powder, and mysterious copper powder used for the materials of the Heavenly Book. As for the tool embryo needed for the heavenly book, I have also bought a batch of goods from the low-grade tool embryo to the top-grade tool embryo. Perhaps, brother, you... She wanted to say something but stopped. Lin Muyu couldn't help but smile. If you have any ideas, just say it. Jean Xiaotang pursed her red lips as if she had made a huge decision and said, perhaps we can take out a large sum of money to train the experts of the heavenly book inscription. Let them provide the finished tool embryo of the heavenly book to the Zine Flower Chamber of Commerce and then sell it at a high price. However, now, anyone who can write human books and spiritual books will rush to the heavenly book pavilion, and it will be difficult for the Chamber of Commerce to attract talents. This is not urgent. Lin Muyu sat down and said leisurely, anyway, all the funds of the Zine Flower Chamber of Commerce are in your hands, and I have given you full authority to manage it. You do as you see fit. I believe in your ability. Jean Xiaoying pouted her small mouth as if she was acting coquettishly and said, but I am not even 20 years old, I am still a child. I always need someone to rely on, and I need encouragement. Lin Muyu was speechless for a while. Then, do your best, try your best to attract more talents who can write heavenly books to join the Zine Flower Chamber of Commerce. I believe that Xiao Yin will also agree with us to do so. Yes, I understand. Jean Xiaotang stood up confidently and said with a smile, then I will return to the Chamber of Commerce to continue with my work. All right, brother Yu, are you still continuing with your inscription? Xiaotang knows that you are a genius. If you can inscribe a level 7 god-slaying inscription, Xiaotang can guarantee that you can sell it for a sky-high price of more than 5 million, so do your best. Yes, I will go. Okay. Looking at Jean Xiaotang's departing figure, Lin Muyu could not help but feel joy in his heart. So the inscription was really that valuable. It was a pity that the success rate of his inscription was very low. The success rate of the Divine Imperial Seal was only about 5%, and there was only one finished product out of 20 tools. The success rate of the God-slaying inscription was still 0%, and there was not a single finished product. But the good news was that his understanding of inscription was getting deeper, and his Ihai's response to the inscription formation was getting stronger. Especially these 2 days, he had a strong premonition that the inscription technique was going to have a breakthrough. Late at night, the brush was not stopped. Sha, pieces of tool powder fell from Lin Muyu's inscription pen. His determined face was full of calmness, and he meticulously inscribed the god-slaying inscription on the armor. Between his fingers was a faint king's fighting flame, and in his Ihai, a huge inscription pen was floating up and down. The mind pen goes out to sea. This was the spiritual power that Fushi's heavenly book mantra had condensed in his heart. A trickle of sweat rolled down his cheeks and gently splashed on the tool. Lin Muyu suddenly stopped. He felt a powerful force rising from his Ihai. Immediately after, he looked up to the sky, only to see an indigo ray of light descending from the vault of heaven. In the sky, a giant golden brush descended from the sky, directly seeping into his Ihai, illuminating the entire ocean of Ihai. And this process was completed in a few short seconds. Master, are you all right? Outside, Wei Chao's voice came. He was on duty today, and Bai Yin had gone to sleep. I'm fine. Lin Muyu replied. He could not help but feel happy. This sign already showed that he had really broken through and entered the Holy Brush Amaterasu, realm of Fushi's heavenly book mantra. He slowly sat down and took out another shield to inscribe. Not long after, the shield broke, and he did not succeed. Continue, inscribe again. It broke again, and he changed to another one. The golden holy brush in his Ihai finally seemed to be summoned, and slowly condensed between Lin Muyu's fingers. Suddenly, his whole body trembled, and a strange scene appeared in his Ihai. Countless figures of God-level masters flew across his mind, and this time, the brush moved like a dragon. In the blink of an eye, a perfect God-slaying inscription appeared in front of him, and with a hua, a faint light rose. Success. Chapter 495. The figures of emperor gods, divine kings, and ultimate gods flew past his mind like rolling quicksand. Lin Muyu seemed to have gone through a huge ordeal as he broke out in a cold sweat. His clothes were soaked in the blink of an eye. The whole process of carving seemed to be out of his control. The moment the carving of the seal formation was completed, his spiritual sense suddenly flew out involuntarily and directly entered the seal formation. Swoosh! His spiritual sense condensed into a body. He was still wearing the white robe imperial forest armor. He was standing at the foot of the seal formation, and the formation under his feet was glowing faintly. "Where is this?" he muttered to himself in confusion. At this moment, a faint voice came from the void where the seal formation was located. "Lin Muyu? Lin Muyu, I'm here. For you." Lin Muyu raised his hand and pulled out the star's sword as he looked at the dark chaotic space with vigilance. There was no end to the surroundings, or it should be said that he couldn't see anything at all. There was only darkness and the profound formation under his feet. Lin Muyu suddenly felt a sense of claustrophobia, and his spirit was quickly approaching the edge of collapse. Whoosh! Suddenly, the light of the profound formation exploded and rays of golden light shot up to the sky. Just when Lin Muyu raised her head to look, she saw an old man in a green robe descending from the sky. His body kept changing in size, and in the blink of an eye, he seemed to have covered the entire sky. Behind his body, there was a faint green divine dragon that was swallowing clouds and spitting out mist. The old man's black eyes shot out a ray of divine light, causing Lin Muyu to have a feeling that she had no choice but to submit to him. However, Lin Muyu didn't know who he was and was unwilling to kneel. He stood still under the pressure of his divine power. The king's battle flame surged around his body, and the star's sword was placed on the ground with a clang. He maintained his standing posture, and the twin martial souls were forced out. In the whistling sound, they disintegrated and fused, turning into a 7 luminaries sword that floated around his body. The old man looked at him with his black eyes and said, "Lin Muyu, it was you who opened the heavenly book and reopened the heavenly imperial gate, preventing the spiritual chi of heaven and earth from being exclusively enjoyed by the gods of the heavenly realm. As the former ruler of the 3 realms, I should be thanking you, but your cultivation is too low, you can't bear my power at all." Lin Muyu looked straight at him. "Who are you and why did you send me to this place?" The old man chuckled and said, "The gods used to call me Tai Hao, and some called me Huang Shi, but my original name should be Fushi. Lin Muyu, you are a human from the east of my plane. In a sense, you are my descendant." "Fushi?" Lin Muyu's body trembled. He never thought that he would be able to see a legendary figure. Was this kind-looking old man in front of him the legendary Fushi? He couldn't help but kneel on the ground, holding the hilt of his sword, and said piously, "Lin Muyu pays his respects to Fushi." Fushi smiled. "I have already ascended to the heavens beyond heaven and no longer care about the matters of the 3 realms. The battle of the gods in the universe has long been beyond my reach. What you saw was a trace of divine sense that I left in Fushi's heavenly book. Child, since you have opened the heavenly book, then you are my fated person. The fact that you can see me means that you have already comprehended the holy brush Amaterasu. You are a talented genius. I only hope that you can unlock the mystery of the last 3 volumes of the heavenly book as soon as possible. After obtaining the divine power of the heavenly book, you must remember to treat the common people with kindness. Remember my words, there is only one sentence to unlock the seal of the heavenly book. When the moon is full with the power of a man, he can reach the other side in 1 move. He is the owner of the heavenly book." As he said this, the image of Fushi slowly dissipated, and the light of the formation gradually dimmed. Lin Muyu's spiritual sense suddenly returned to his body. He let out a soft cry. He felt as if all the energy in his body was being sucked dry, and this energy was continuously gathering in the shield in front of him. In an instant, the light grew brighter. Now was the time to embed the gemstones. The god-slaying seal needed to be embedded with 2 stones. One was a divine crystal, and the other was a Shura stone. The Shura stone was easy to get, it could be bought for 5,000 genin coins, but the divine crystal was one of the best in the world. Fortunately, there were 3 divine crystals left in Qin Bing's tomb, so he could use one now. When the 2 gemstones were embedded in the shield, the entire god-slaying seal was instantly activated. A blood-red wave enveloped the surface of the shield, and the god-slaying seal was completely completed. Lin Muyu sat down leisurely. At least half of her physical strength and combat energy had been absorbed by the shield. As expected, a level 7 engraving was definitely a physical activity. It required the engraver's own strength to be sealed in the engraving in order to form the formation. Wei Chou, come in, Lin Muyu said. Wei Chou pushed the door open and entered. He said respectfully, Commander, what are your orders? Bring a few dozen people and personally hand this shield to Jin, shouting. What time is it now? There's still about 2 hours until dawn. All right, I'm going to sleep. No one is to disturb me. This was a very deep sleep. In the dream, figures kept appearing one after another. Finally, Fuxi appeared again. He only smiled at Lin Muyu, but didn't say a word. In the dream, Lin Muyu softly murmured the words Fuxi left behind. When the moon is full, with the power of a man, he can reach the other side with a single step. He is the owner of the heavenly book. What did this mean? She didn't understand at all. When she woke up, it was already afternoon. Wei Chou brought over a sumptuous lunch. He ate nearly 2 wild pheasants. This made Wei Chou secretly laugh. Commander's appetite is getting better and better. Lin Muyu picked up a cup of wine and drank it in one gulp. She said, training consumes physical strength. Wei Chou, how's your training of the diamond body? Wei Chou said shamefully, I'm useless. I've only trained to the 2nd level. Not bad. Take your time. Yes. At this time, another shocking wave was set off in Lanyan City. The Purple Flower Chamber of Commerce released news that they would be selling a shield with a level 7 god-slaying seal in 3 days. For a moment, the entire city was shocked. Heavenly Book Pavilion, Ouyang Manor. Bang. Ouyang Bao slammed his palm on the table and said with a pale face, Damn, which freak could carve a god-slaying seal? My god, this is too exaggerated. Ouyang, who couldn't help but laugh. Third brother, don't be anxious. I'm guessing that the person who carved the god-slaying seal is also the same person who carved the divine governing seal. These 2 items were carved by the same person. Ouyang Long, who was dressed in white and had an elegant demeanor, smiled faintly and said, A divine commanding seal embryo can be sold for a sky-high price of 2 million Jin dollars. I wonder how much Jin Xiaodang is going to sell it for. Ouyang Bao said, Our Ouyang residence's wealth is incomparable to the Ji residence and the Zhong residence. This divine governing seal will most likely fall into the Ji residence's hands. At this time, the door opened with a creak, and Ouyang Ping walked in. His eyes were shining, and in terms of spirit, it was unknown how many times stronger he was than his 3 sons. Father. Dragon, Tiger, and Bao stood up and bowed respectfully. Ouyang Ping said, You all know? Ouyang Long said, The news of a level 7 god-slaying seal has spread throughout Lanyan City and even the 4 provinces in the north. Ouyang Ping's eyes were solemn. The ancestors left a prophecy that the one who wields the god-slaying seal will wield the Book of God. The secrets of the Book of God and the Book of God are hidden in the god-slaying seal. If we can obtain this divine slaying seal and study it, it may be of unexpected help to us when we inscribe the Book of God. However, with Jin Xiaotang's shrewdness and the strength of Lin Muyu behind her, I'm afraid the price of this divine slaying seal will be unaffordable. So, I need to discuss this with you. Ouyang Bao said, Father, if you have something to say, just say it. Ouyang Ping nodded and said, Just yesterday, the Cloud Monarch Su Myun sent someone to discuss with me. The Cloud Monarch residence needs our Ouyang residence's strength. As long as we agree to serve the Cloud Monarch residence, we will be able to obtain sufficient help from the Cloud Monarch. I think the Cloud Monarch residence can still afford 20 million Jin coins. After all, his 1,000 Victories merchant house is one of the top merchant houses in Lanyan City. Ouyang Long's eyes turned cold and he said, Father, don't tell me, you want to serve the Cloud Monarch residence? We came to Lanyan City on the orders of Her Highness the Empress. If we pledge allegiance to Yunzhong Wangfu, I'm afraid it's not appropriate. Once Her Highness the Empress investigates, our Ouyang residents won't be able to bear the consequences. I know. Ouyang Ping waved his hand and said, my cooperation with the Cloud Monarch is also carried out in secret. The premise is that the Ouyang residents must sell half of the Book of Spirit, Book of Earth, Book of Heaven, and even Book of God to the Cloud Monarch residents, and the price will be the same as the market price. Ouyang Bao was stunned and he said, what does the Cloud Monarch mean? Does he want to hoard the Heavenly Book weapon embryo? I think so. Why does he want to hoard the Heavenly Book weapon embryo? The Heavenly Book weapon embryo is extremely powerful. Could it be that he... Bao? Ouyang Ping's expression became stern as he said, don't say things that you shouldn't say. Yunzhong Wang has his own plans, and it's not something that people like us can figure out. We only need to remember that Yunzhong Wang is just a kind of cooperation. We are loyal to Her Highness the Empress. Everything we are doing now is only for the sake of the Ouyang family's rapid rise. Yes, father. The three sons raised their heads together. Ouyang Ping's eyes flashed with a trace of uneasiness, and his heart was in turmoil. Lanyan City seemed to be calm, but who knew how much turbulence was hidden in the shadows? In the past few days, there were only two topics of discussion in the entire Lanyan City. One was the deity-slaying seal, and no one knew where the deity came from to engrave this kind of artifact that could only be engraved by a divine sealer. The other topic was the Book of Heaven. Countless geniuses in the Heavenly Book Pavilion were working hard to engrave the Book of Heaven. Within 3 days, there were already 4 local books produced. Lanyan City could be said to be full of talents, as if another golden age was about to arrive. Chapter 496. The fullness of the moon is like the power of a man. The one who can reach the other shore in one move is the owner of the Heavenly Book. The moonlight shone on the courtyard with a chill. Lin Muyu stood beside the huge millstone, and the golden Fuxi Heavenly Book was placed above it. The Heavenly Book was blank, and the last 3 volumes were just wordless Heavenly Books. Lin Muyu kept repeating the words that God Emperor Fuxi had left for him, but he could not understand the mystery behind it. From Qin Yin and Tang Xiaoxi, he learned that although Prince Huai, Qin Bing, was a divine sealer 4,000 years ago, he did not have any higher achievements. This was enough to prove that although Qin Bing had the Fuxi Heavenly Book, he did not understand the last 3 volumes of the wordless Heavenly Book. He slowly covered the Heavenly Book with his palm, and his spirit sense lingered around the king's combat flame, slowly seeping into the Heavenly Book. Suddenly, the Heavenly Book seemed to produce a huge suction force, and it suddenly sucked in Lin Muyu's spirit sense and power. Whoosh! His eyes suddenly lit up, and he had already entered a mysterious domain formed by the Heavenly Book. It was as if he was standing in the universe of stars. There was a void under his feet, and there were thousands of stars above his head. Those stars were glowing with a dazzling light, and they were burning their lives to release powerful energy. There was also a bright sun above his head, like the sun in the middle of the sky. Where is this? Lin Muyu looked around in confusion. However, at this moment, a golden light suddenly appeared under his feet, and his king's combat flame was completely sucked in. No matter how he struggled, he could not break free. The fiery red king's combat flame rushed out and left his body, fusing with the golden light, forming a golden liquid that flowed out. There seemed to be an invisible circular ditch in the void, and Lin Muyu's king's combat flame gathered and flowed far away. Not long after, the golden energy plasma converged together and rose into a raging flame. What happened? The aura in Lin Muyu's body quickly began to fill up, but his legs were extremely weak. His feet could not be pulled out from the golden energy plasma, so he could only move along this circle with a radius of over 100 meters. And at this moment, the one furthest from him in the entire circle suddenly erupted with light, and a golden key energy light rose up, slowly turning. Key! He was suddenly enlightened. Could it be that this key was the way to unlock the seal of Fuxi's Heavenly Book? Fuxi said with a face full of smiles, Lin Muyu, my descendant, I did not expect you to enter the golden pool so quickly. It seems that you are indeed fated with the heavenly book. The key of the heavenly book has appeared. As long as you can obtain the key of the heavenly book, you will be able to unlock the seal of the heavenly book. However, you must remember, every time you enter the golden pool of the heavenly book, you only have one chance to leave the golden pool under your feet. If you are unable to obtain the key of the heavenly book, your spiritual perception will be sent out of the heavenly book. After saying that, regardless of whether Lin Muyu had anything to say, God Emperor Fushi's divine body quickly dissipated, turning into a golden light rain that fell among the stars. What the hell? Lin Muyu frowned. The key of the heavenly book was not far away. It should be very easy to obtain. Therefore, she took off and walked along the golden pool. However, after walking for half a minute, she realized that the key of the heavenly book was actually moving as well. The golden key was actually moving parallel to the center of her circle. F***ck, Lin Muyu was a little embarrassed. He was obviously toying with her. In that case, there was only one way to obtain the key of the heavenly book, and that was to jump over. After measuring the distance with her eyes, the golden pool was gradually enlarging. The key of the heavenly book was already about 200 meters away from her. With a low shout, the fiery Red King's combat flames spun rapidly around her body. She stepped on the golden pool and soared into the sky with a swoosh. She used about 80% of her strength. However, the moment she left the golden pool, Lin Muyu realized that something was wrong. The speed at which she leaped through the air was too fast. In a flash, she had already left the boundary of the golden pool. She could only watch as the key of the heavenly book slipped past her eyes. Failure. The surrounding space began to distort abruptly. Thousands of rays of starlight surged forth and bombarded Lin Muyu's spiritual sense body. It was excruciating pain and directly sent him out of the heavenly book domain. He suddenly opened his eyes and looked at his hands and feet. He was fine. It was just that his spiritual body felt very tired. It seemed that entering the domain of the heavenly book consumed a lot of spiritual power. However, there was still at least 60% of his spiritual power that could be used. Lin Muyu took a deep breath and carefully calculated the fact that she had used 80% of her strength. Perhaps, she could obtain the key of the heavenly book with 40% of her strength. Therefore, she covered the heavenly book with her palm again and concentrated. After about 10 minutes, she finally entered the domain of the heavenly book again. The king's combat flame in her body continuously entered the heavenly book and gathered into the golden pool. The key of the heavenly book also appeared in the distance. It was glowing with a dazzling light as if it was mocking Lin Muyu. Linji. Lin Muyu silently cheered herself on. Her body slowly sank and the king's combat flame around her quickly revolved. This time, she used about 40% of her strength. She leaped and went straight for the key of the heavenly book. In the gentle breeze, the key of the heavenly book was getting closer and closer. However, just as Lin Muyu was about to reach it, the scene in front of him suddenly stretched out. That's right. The distance that was originally at most half a meter away from the key of the heavenly book was instantly stretched to nearly 100 meters. He could only watch from afar as the key of the heavenly book left him. F***ck. What the F***ck? Lin Muyu cursed angrily. The 9 heavenly stars sent him out again. This was the second time she entered the domain of the heavenly book. This time, she had almost exhausted all of her spiritual power. Lin Muyu could not help but feel a little disappointed. The key of the heavenly book was clearly within her reach, but it flew so far away the moment she was about to get her hands on it. It was as if the scale of the map had shrunk in an instant. What did this mean? The fullness of the moon is like the power of a man. The one who reaches the other shore in one step is the master of the heavenly book. The fullness of the moon is like the power of a man. The one who reaches the other shore in one step is the master of the heavenly book. He repeated the words left behind by Fushi. Suddenly, his heart lit up. The fullness of the moon and the power of a man. These two sentences were equivalent to telling him that the size of the golden pool depended on his king's combat flame to fill it up. In fact, the stronger the total amount of king's combat flame, the bigger the golden pool. This should be the meaning. As for reaching the other shore in one step, it meant that he had to reach the other shore in one jump. Ha! Ha! In an instant, Lin Muyu could not help but laugh out loud. The golden pool was formed by the gathering of his king's combat flame. The secret of the heavenly book lay in the appropriate amount of strength. In other words, he had to reach the perfect diameter of the golden pool in one jump. Otherwise, it would be futile no matter how many times he jumped. This meant that the control of strength had to be precise. Not even the slightest difference could be tolerated. That's right. The maximum value of his strength was equal to the circumference of the golden pool. The strength used for this jump could only be the diameter. He understood this multiplier too well. It was the legendary pi. This jump could not be more or less. It could only be a multiplier of the diameter divided by the circumference. In other words, 1/pi equals 1/3141596 equals 318.30989% of his strength. In an instant, Lin Muyu was secretly pleased. Fortunately, his mathematics was not bad. Otherwise, how could he survive in this mysterious world? No wonder Qin Bing did not grasp the true mystery of Fuxi's heavenly book. It was because he did not know what pi was. It was impossible for a bad student to fall behind others step by step. This fully proved the importance of knowledge. However, it was easier said than done. It was already very strong to control his strength at 31%. Not to mention, he had to be precise to the last few decimal places. Forget it. His soul power was empty. He would sleep and recover his soul power first. The next day he only woke up at noon. His soul power was full and he could continue trying. However, this time, Lin Muyu did not rush into the heavenly book domain like a hothead. Instead, after eating lunch, he asked Wei Chou and the others not to disturb him. Then, he stood in the courtyard of the main hall of the camp. After standing still, he called out softly, "Lulu, come out." Swoosh! The beautiful female elf official flew out of Yi. She flapped her crystal wings and said with a smile, "Brother, what can I do for you, Lulu?" Lin Muyu smiled slightly. "Can you help me measure my strength ratio? I will increase my strength." "Lulu, can you help me tell the percentage of strength that I have increased?" "Accurate to 2 decimal places. Is that okay?" "Sure." Lulu was originally a string of data. Moreover, she lived in Lin Muyu's Yi. Naturally, she was more clear about his strength level. With a soft shout, the king's fighting flame surged, blowing the white imperial forest cloak. Lin Muyu stood in the courtyard like a statue. His strength slowly increased. When it reached about 30%, he stopped and asked, "How much is it now?" Lulu blinked and said, 3,324%. Lin Muyu slowly reduced his strength and asked, "What about now?" 2,847%. Lulu said. Lin Muyu frowned and slowly raised his qi. He increased his fighting qi a little and asked, "What about now?" 3,102%. Lulu said. Lin Muyu silently moved his qi and slightly increased the king's fighting flame. He asked again, "What about now?" 3,272%. This was too difficult. Lin Muyu's control of strength was already very good. It was just that he could not reach the level of perfection. He repeated this for a long time. After nearly 4 hours, when his strength reached 3,181%, it was accurate to 1 decimal place. Thus, he called Lulu back and stopped his strength at this point. He repeatedly familiarized himself with the feeling of this level of strength. 10 minutes later, he called Lulu again and lifted it up again. He searched for the feeling of the previous level of strength. The king's fighting flame danced all over his body. He smiled and asked, "How much is it now?" "Wow, amazing," Lulu stuck out her tongue and said, 3,187%. It seemed that he could only control it to 1 decimal place. He was temporarily unable to reach the last 2 places. Done. Lin Muyu nodded. He could try again. Chapter 497. Swoosh. His spiritual perception turned into his body and appeared in the heavenly book territory. The battle energy around him quickly surged out and formed a golden pool. The key of the heavenly book also slowly appeared and rotated slowly in the distance. It was still mocking Lin Muyu, the loser who kept fighting after losing. One more time, don't rush. Lin Muyu comforted his repeatedly injured heart and began to increase his aura to find the feeling just now. He increased his battle energy to about 318% and suddenly leaped forward. Whoosh! The strong wind flew past his ears and the key of the heavenly book was getting closer and closer. Just as he was about to touch it, the things in front of him suddenly stretched out a lot, but they were still within his control. Just as Lin Muyu was about to reach out, the surrounding scenery stretched out again. Suddenly, the key of the heavenly book appeared nearly 50 meters away. Suddenly, a million curses ran through Lin Muyu's heart. This setting was too abnormal. He exited the heavenly book territory in disappointment and took a deep breath. Did he really have to be accurate to the last 2 decimal places to get the key of the heavenly book? A sense of frustration lingered in his heart. It was not that he did not want to work hard, but with his current cultivation, his control of power had not reached perfection. He could not sensitively capture 0.01% of power. At this moment, Lulu in Ehai suddenly spoke. Brother, do you still remember the 5% divine power that the 7 luminaries Demon Emperor gave you? Lulu remembered that the 7 luminaries Demon Emperor's control of power was not just 1%, he could even achieve 0.01%. Therefore, Lulu judged that a godly state master's control of power must be above 0.01%. However, the 5% divine power of the 7 luminaries Demon Emperor is too weak and not enough for you to achieve all this. Why don't you refine a Godhead fragment and see if you can integrate more divine power into it? Lin Muyu's heart lit up. Lulu's reminder was too timely. He was overjoyed and said, "Okay, I'll try." He took out one of the 2 Godhead shards from his cosmos sack. This shard was glowing with a fiery red light, just like a gemstone. However, how could a mortal see through the power contained within it? What? Summoning her cauldron, Lin Muyu surrounded it with starfire as she tossed out the Godhead shard. Instantly, the fiery red shard let out a buzzing sound as if it was resisting the Godhead shard. Lin Muyu held the star's sword with both hands and stood in the treasure refining cauldron. Her eyes were closed, and her cloak fluttered in the strong wind. No, the resistance from the Godhead fragment is getting stronger and stronger. It seems that the treasure refining cauldron can't control this kind of divine power at all. Damn it. Gritting her teeth, Lin Muyu summoned the God-binding chains and the 7 luminaries' holy gourd at the same time. She infused her dark force into the cauldron to suppress the energy contained in the Godhead fragment. Wung, wung, wung. The flames became more and more intense, and the whole treasure refining cauldron trembled. Lin Muyu closed her eyes and continued to use her king's fighting flame to strengthen the power in the treasure refining cauldron. She tried to increase the temperature of the Godhead fragment. To refine a fire attribute Godhead fragment, she must have a higher temperature and stronger power. After all, the law of the world was to bully the weak. If the opponent was not as strong as the opponent, there was no need to talk about refining it. However, the power in the Godhead fragment was very strong, and it continued to fight against the treasure refining cauldron. After 6 hours, the sky was already dark, but the Godhead fragment was still not refined. Instead, a layer of spiritual energy on the surface of the Godhead fragment was slowly peeling off. Immediately, Lin Muyu was secretly delighted. Is she going to succeed? But at this moment, a figure slowly gathered in the flames. It was a white-bearded elder with a ruthless expression. He roared angrily, "Little bastard, you want to usurp this godly monarch's power with just you?" Then the old man swung his palm at Lin Muyu, and the flames surged up to the sky. Heavens, this is also a Godhead fragment of a God King, a middle god. Lin Muyu groaned inwardly. There was no turning back now, so she had no choice but to fight it head-on. She raised her arm and pushed out the power of the 6 luminaries' heavenly tribulation. Boom! The power of both sides surged and there was a loud boom. The treasure refining cauldron finally could not withstand the power of heaven and earth, and it suddenly exploded. The flames swept out in all directions, destroying all the pavilions and waterside pavilions around the courtyard. It was a terrifying sight to behold. Lin Muyu spat out a mouthful of blood and staggered a few steps back. She was in a sorry state, and she was already seriously injured. The Godhead fragment slowly fell to the ground with a ding, but the energy on its surface had already begun to dissipate. Holy shit, it looks like the moment the Godhead King unleashed his will inside the Godhead fragment to attack, it also destroyed the Godhead fragment's defense. It's time to refine it again. Enduring the pain, Lin Muyu stood up again and held the cosmic sword. With a thought, the treasure refining cauldron reformed. It was also at this time that Wei Chao's voice came from outside. "Master, what's wrong?" "It's nothing. Stand guard outside, and don't let anyone get close to me." "Yes." The Godhead fragment sizzled in the treasure refining cauldron. It was burned red, but it still seemed to be struggling to resist the refinement. The flames on both sides surged and fought against each other. The Godhead fragment's ferocious look appeared again. His face was a little pale, but he controlled the flames with both hands and laughed loudly. "What? You still want to test your God King Grandpa's invincible divine power? Come, I'll let you know how the word death is written." "Motherf asterisk her." Lin Muyu cursed loudly. "Motherf asterisk her." The Godhead fragment was even more furious. As he cursed, he exerted all his strength to counterattack Lin Muyu. At this time, the Fushi's heavenly book on the broken stone block behind Lin Muyu suddenly shone brightly. It rustled and flipped through the golden pages as if it was reacting. Could it be that it was attracted by the power in the Godhead fragment? Lin Muyu was a little stunned. He freed his hand and pressed it on the Fushi's heavenly book that was flipping through the pages. Swoosh! A milky white divine power gathered on the heavenly book and flowed into Lin Muyu's palm. Lin Muyu's body trembled. How could a mortal withstand such a mighty divine power? He quickly pulled his hand away, but the divine power from the Fushi's heavenly book had already flowed into his palm. A few seconds later, as if sensing the divine power from the heavenly book entering his body, another divine power in his body surged and fought back. It was the divine power left behind by the 7 luminaries' demon emperor. The 2 divine powers immediately fought against each other with Lin Muyu's body as the battlefield, neither giving way to the other. At that moment, Lin Muyu wanted to die. He growled, "Are you kidding me? I'm about to be counterattacked by the Godhead fragment, and you guys are still fighting." Suddenly, the 2 divine powers seemed to feel guilty. One flowed into his left hand and the other into his right hand, and they fought together. Lin Muyu pushed both of his palms out at the same time. He growled, "Melt." What? The Divine King's body trembled. His strength was immediately suppressed. His face was filled with horror. "You little brat, who are you? I can't accept this." The heavenly book's divine power, the 7 luminaries' demon emperor's divine power, the 7 glorious stars' transformation. The 3 powerful divine powers merged together and crashed into the Godhead fragment in the cauldron. Instantly, the Divine King's body began to crumble. Even though he was a divine king, the Godhead fragment only contained less than 10% of his divine power. On the other hand, Lin Muyu's attack contained the 7 luminaries' demon emperor's dark force and the heavenly book's dark force. How could a mere Godhead fragment withstand it? Bang! The Godhead fragment officially shattered. Countless divine powers turned into fiery red starlight that danced in the air inside the cauldron. This was a great opportunity to refine it. Lin Muyu took a deep breath and quickly absorbed the rich divine powers. One by one, the starlight seeped into his skin and slowly merged with his blood vessels. This was the mystical ability of the cauldron. It could directly assimilate other people's divine powers into its own, eliminating the need for fusion. As the 3rd divine power entered his body, Lin Muyu couldn't help but smile. Suddenly, The cauldron shone brightly and began to refine the dark force in his chi si. This fellow's heart was evil. The heavenly book's divine power and the 7 luminaries' demon emperor's divine power had just helped him, and now he wanted to kill him. In an instant, before the 3 divine powers could resist, they were completely refined by Lin Muyu's mighty power. Wisps of divine power gathered in his chi si and became a different kind of power from the king's fighting flame. This power was cultivated from Lin Muyu's heart and soul. The power was very clear and very pure. Suddenly, a comfortable feeling spread through his body. This new divine power was quickly healing the damage caused by the 7 glorious stars' transformation. This was a divine power that was filled with the power to restore life. Lin Muyu was pleasantly surprised. At the same time, this divine power also contained the shocking flame force and the vigorous destructive power of the 7 luminaries. It seemed to have combined the strengths of the 3 divine powers. Ha ha, ha. In the night sky, Lin Muyu laughed heartily. This time, his power had really improved by leaps and bounds. Thanks to this quintessence fragment, the intensity of his king's fighting flame had increased by a lot. He had already stepped into the realm of initial success of the divine legacy realm. At the same time, Lin Muyu named this divine power Fuxi Divine Power. After all, it was thanks to this divine power contained in the heavenly book that he could refine the quintessence fragment. It was also at this moment, when his qi sank into his dantian, he could see every little ripple in his sea of qi and sea of will. Even the slightest ripple in his sea of qi couldn't escape his perception. This could only prove one thing: his control over his strength had deepened by another level. Lulu, come out. The beautiful female elf official flew out and said with a smile, "Congratulations on obtaining Fuxi Divine Power, big brother. This wisp of divine power is much stronger than the 5% divine power left behind by the Demon Emperor." Lin Muyu was well aware that although the strength of this Fuxi divine power was not as strong as the fundamental power of the king's fighting flame, it was enough to be used in actual combat. After all, the purity of divine power was incomparable to the king's fighting flame. Continue, power test. Chapter 498. 3181%. 3182%. 3183%. Lulu kept reporting Lin Muyu's power coefficient. When it reached 3183%, she stopped and smiled. "This is the power. Brother, feel it." Lin Muyu closed his eyes. After cultivating Fuxi's divine power, his sea of will and sea of qi were refined and his sensitivity was greatly improved. Now, he could easily sense the degree of a certain level of power and easily control the subtle fluctuations of power. This was indeed incomparable to his previous cultivation. He was secretly delighted. This time, the key of the heavenly book would not be able to escape his grasp, right? He called Lulu back and began his attempt. When his palm covered the heavenly book actually emitted a power that came from the source. It was as if Lin Muyu's power and Fuxi's heavenly book had merged into one. Swoosh. After entering the heavenly book's territory, the power quickly turned into a golden pool and extended. When the key of the heavenly book appeared, Lin Muyu also took a deep breath and began to slowly increase the power of the king's combat flame. When it reached 3183%, he immediately stopped increasing the power. Looking at the key of the heavenly book in the distance, he gently stepped on the golden pool and directly leaped over. Close, close. The key of the heavenly book was getting closer and closer. As expected, the scene suddenly stretched, but the direction he was flying towards was still the key of the heavenly book. After all, his power was already accurate to the second decimal place. However, just as he was about to touch it, the scene rapidly stretched again. Shameless. Lin Muyu almost cursed it out loud. Could it be that he had to be accurate to the third or even the fourth decimal place to obtain the key of the heavenly book? However, this time, Lin Muyu did not say anything. Just as the scene was about to stretch, he raised his arm. The gourd vine broke out of his body and directly wrapped around the key of the heavenly book that was about 10 meters away. he suddenly exerted force and directly pulled the key of the heavenly book back. But the key of the heavenly book was firmly in his hand. To deal with a shameless setting, one must use shameless methods. At this moment, the key of the heavenly book suddenly turned into a golden light and seeped into his body, as if some kind of seal had been opened. Lin Muyu's heavenly book was quickly sent out and returned to the real world. When he opened his eyes, he found that Fuxi's heavenly book was emitting a strange light. The originally wordless heavenly book had lines of tiny words. They were all divine words, which were oracle bone script. At this moment, Lin Muyu could not help but feel grateful for the arrangement of the heavens. Most people would not be able to understand the oracle bone script, but he could. This could be traced back to when he was young. In order to chase after girls, Lin Muyu had once been deeply immersed in the wonderful subject of archaeology, to the point that he had gone crazy studying the oracle bone inscriptions. It was no exaggeration to say that he was familiar with the oracle bone inscriptions, to the point that he had almost forgotten his original intention of studying archaeology to chase after girls. Looking at the divine text on the heavenly book, Lin Muyu was secretly delighted. It was time to learn the heavenly book's inscriptions. On the first line of the heavenly book, there was a row of ice-type inscriptions: frost, XXXXX, chill, XXXXX, freezing, XXXXX, snowflake, XXXX. Lin Muyu was confused. There were only a few words on this line of engraved text, and the rest were replaced by circle symbols. Could it be that she had to fill it in herself? Upon closer inspection, it seemed that this was indeed the case. It was said that the inscriptions of the tomes of heaven were not rigidly bound to the format. As early as thousands of years ago, there were many masters who could innovate the inscriptions of the tomes of heaven. They only had to follow a few keywords. Lin Muyu was relieved and slowly closed the Fuxi tomes of arcane. She was so tired that she was about to die. Moreover, she didn't have any materials for inscription. Even if she wanted to write the tomes of arcane, she didn't have the conditions. She'd better have a good sleep. At this time, the sky was about to brighten. Wei Chao's voice came from outside the courtyard. "Lord Commander, Miss Shouting just came over. She said that there will be an auction for the Godslayer's seal embryo this afternoon. She asked if you would like to personally come to the Purple Yinhua auction house." Lin Muyu pushed open the door of the main hall and said, "Send someone to tell Xiaotang that I'll be there on time. Also, help me find a new bed. I want to have a good sleep." "Yes, Commander." Wei Chou nodded his head. At the same time, he looked at the ruined inner courtyard of the main hall. He could not help but be surprised, but he did not say anything. As a cultivator, he naturally knew this kind of pain. The slightest carelessness could cause damage to objects, but for a cultivator to be strong enough to destroy a courtyard wall of 100 meters, Lin Muyu's strength could almost be called a monster. When she opened her eyes, it was already noon. Lin Muyu hurriedly got up and washed up. Wei Chou had prepared lunch and ate a few mouthfuls. Outside, Bai Yin held Taksha's hand and said with a smile, "Commander, let's go." She turned around and got on the horse, bringing Bai Yin and Wei Chou straight to the Purple Yinhua auction house. Tongtian Street was filled with people. When they arrived in front of the Purple Yinhua auction house, Lin Muyu was shocked. There were so many people. It was a sea of people. There were carriages parked outside. Many of the carriages were decorated with gold and engraved patterns. 2 or 4 carriages could only be considered average. Some carriages were even pulled by 6 horses. This meant that they were at least marquises. Otherwise, they wouldn't dare to be so ostentatious. Lin Muyu was also a marquis. Marquis Yunling was personally conferred by the Empress, but he didn't pay much attention to it. He whipped the horse quickly. No carriage was as comfortable as the treading snow warhorse. Fortunately, Jin Xiaotang sent someone to welcome them. After entering through the side door of the auction house, they went straight to the auction house. Lin Muyu was arranged to be in a VIP room with a very good view. She could see everything in the auction house clearly. Furthermore, there were 2 beautiful maids serving her. They poured tea and presented plates of fruits. They were very enthusiastic. It seemed that these maids also knew the identity of the young general in front of them. He was one of the commanders of the 9 great armies of the empire. He was conferred the title of Marquis Yunling. He was also one of the 4 heroes of Lan Yen conferred by the former emperor. He had completely defeated the Qianfeng army of the demon race in the Battle of Wildfire Plains. Wei Chou looked at the auction house and couldn't help but exclaim, "There are so many people." Bai Yin nodded, "At least 10,000 people." Lin Muyu smiled slightly. Only Jin Xiaotang could create this kind of array, right? There was no lack of nobles among the people who came. For example, Tang Tian and Tang Lu, Marquis Lingbei and Marquis Lingxi were here. In addition, Prince Qin Yong of Prince Zhong's residence was also here. Prince Zhong's residence was one of the 4 great families of heavenly tomes. Because of the opening of the gate of heavenly defense, the heavenly tomes once again possessed the power of heaven and earth. As a result, Prince Zhong's residence, which had been in decline for hundreds of years and was almost forgotten by the world, rose rapidly. Even Qin Yin would respectfully address Qin Yong as uncle. It was enough to show how much the empire valued the heavenly tomes. On the auction stage, Jin Xiaoting wore a fiery red soft armor and walked forward with a dagger in her hand. She smiled and said, "First of all, I would like to thank everyone for coming to our Zine Flower Chamber of Commerce today. Xiaotang greets everyone here. I know that most of you are here for the deity slaying seal, but Xiaotang would like to remind everyone that other than the deity slaying seal, we still have many other treasures. For example, this mysterious grade level 2 dagger in my hand, it's used to kill and rob. Pui, it's an excellent weapon for self-defense. The starting price is 8,000 Jin Yin dollars." Lin Muyu sat by the window and smiled as she watched the auction. After 4 hours, Jin Xiaotong's throat was almost hoarse. After auctioning off dozens of items, it was finally time for the main event. Jin Xiaoting carried a shield that glowed with a blood-red light and walked onto the stage. She smiled and said, "Here, this is the deity slaying seal. The deity slaying seal allows the user to possess a certain amount of divine power. Don't miss it when you walk past. The starting price is 1 million Jin Yin dollars. Everyone can bid now, but you must bring enough gold notes with you. Otherwise, Xiaotang will personally send you to the Fire Sparrow Division and have the Fire Sparrow Division's patrol officers treat you with an iron plate." The crowd roared with laughter. Following that, the price of this finale item also began to be called out. 150W. Among the bustling crowd, a young man from the Zhong prince's residence raised his arm. It was Qin Jiao, the only son of the Zhong prince, Qin Yong. Presumably, the Zhong prince's residence had been moved to Lanyan City by Qin Yin's imperial edict, and the entire family must have received a lot of relocation expenses. For these aristocratic families of the heavenly books, Qin Yin had indeed spent a lot of money. Now, this sum of money, Lin Muyu wanted to get it all back for her girlfriend. A mere deity-slaying seal weapon embryo was useless. Even with the deity-slaying seal, could it be a match for a godly state expert? Obviously not. What Lin Muyu valued the most was the heavenly books. A low-grade heavenly book was enough to make Feng Jixing struggle. If he could gather 100 heavenly books and use them together, the power would be unimaginable. It should be similar to the apocalypse, right? Just as Lin Muyu was thinking about it, someone in the huge VIP seats raised his arm and said, 2 million Jin Yin dollars. The person who shouted was Ouyang Long, the eldest son of the heavenly book 4 great families, the Ouyang family. Lin Muyu could not help but snicker. These heavenly book 4 great families were simply thirsting for the deity-slaying seal weapon embryo. Finally, the people from the Ji residence made a move. Ji Shang raised his hand and shouted, 3 million Jin Yin dollars. 4 million Jin Yin dollars. Ouyang Long shouted, unwilling to be outdone. Immediately, Qin Jiao from the Zhong residence said angrily, "Crazy? The Ouyang family is a bunch of lunatics." Ji Shang was also stunned. He looked at Ji Lin suspiciously and said, "Grandfather, where did the Ouyang family get 4 million Jin Yin dollars from? I'm afraid that all the rewards from the Empress wouldn't be that much, right?" Ji Lin frowned. "I don't know either. Continue bidding. If it exceeds 8 million, then forget it. Ji Shang raised his arm again. 5 million Jinin dollars? Ouyang Long's face was ashen. He gritted his teeth and said, "Damn it, I knew it wouldn't end well." As he spoke, he raised his voice and shouted, 7 million Jinin dollars? Everyone at the scene was scared out of their wits. A weapon embryo could be sold at such a high price. How much had it been inflated? 8 million Jinin dollars. Ji Shang's voice was trembling. This was the most money the Ji residents could offer. Any more, and they would probably have to sell their assets. Ouyang Long immediately stood up and shouted, 10 million Jinin dollars. Young master of the Ji residents, do you really want to compete with us? Ji Shang's face was full of forbearance. He cupped his fists and smiled. Ji Shang is convinced. This weapon embryo belongs to the Ouyang family. Jin Xiaotang was also grinning from ear to ear. With a bang, she finalized the deal and said, Young Master Ouyang Long of the Ouyang family has successfully bid 10 million Jinin dollars for the weapon embryo. Please come backstage and trade with me. That was 10 million Jinin dollars. It was enough to equip half of the Longdan army camp. These people were indeed lunatics who did not take money seriously. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.